welcome once again to F Sobriety. I am Craig Woods, fresh from just being mysteriously released by a vigilante hacker.
And I am James Hamilton, and I'm dressed as a Bronze Age superhero version of my character.
Or is it a luchador's costume?
I always did have a thing for Mexican wrestlers.
How are you, James?
I'm not bad, Craig. I'm not bad. How are you?
I'm good. I have some time off work, imminently, so that's nice.
And we are back once again with the Renegade Master.
Yep, and we're back on the Mr. Robot train, and we are back on the Wandavision train, because, well, it's a hip show that everyone's talking about, and if there's one thing this podcast is, James, it is hip and down with the kids.
We certainly are. I can only imagine that we have the youth audience wrapped up in the palm of our hands, not in a creepy Tyrell Wellick sort of way. More on him later.
Yeah, so Wandavision has it's continued to be pretty strong, I would say. So it looks like we're going to expand on that a bit more. I will say, I think we are talking about the show more than I expected us to be. But after our mid-season review, episode 6, which was the last one we just saw, has just come out swinging, and it's certainly more fuel for our theories. And to quote Special Agent Dale Cooper, Sheriff, we've got a lot to talk about.
For sure. I didn't expect that we would be spending much time on this show.
No, same. It wasn't the plan, full disclosure. I think we thought we were going to visit it once in a wee while, maybe do a mid-season, then at the end of the season wrap it up kind of thing. But here we are, 2 episodes subsequently. Yeah, what the hell?
Yep, especially given your MCU fatigue that you were experiencing recently.
Yeah, I mean, this show is doing a lot to revitalise my interest in the MCU, or at least it's opening up a new avenue in the MCU that I'm finding a bit more exciting than most of what was going on in the last few movies. So, yeah, I feel pretty positive about it. We'll see. I'm definitely more excited now about the next slate of movies when they do finally come along.
In 2027.
Yeah, watch this space.
Iron Man of 2027.
So yeah, Mr. Robot fans, don't worry, you're not in the wrong place. This is still a Mr. Robot recap episode. We will be continuing that in the second half of this episode, but our first half is Wandavision time.
And if you want to skip to the beginnings of the Mr. Robot chat, and you don't want to listen to us talk about Wandavision or any of the other subjects we will doubtless veer off into, the Hamiltron will please and kindly, if she's willing, direct you to the timestamp that you should go to in order to just hear our discussion on Mr. Robot Season 1, Episode 6, Brave Traveller. Hamiltron, please.
Since you asked so nicely, dear listener, if you want to get straight to the Mr. Robot chat, skip ahead to 1 hour and 52 minutes. You are welcome, babes.
She is nothing if not accommodating.
I know, I guess maybe we just have to treat her with respect, or at least grovel to her every whim.
Crazy idea, but crazy enough to work. Alright, so shall we dive straight in here to WandaVision Episode 6?
1, 2, WandaVision! Don't try to fight the chaos, don't question what you've done.
WandaVision Season 1, Episode 6, and an all-new Halloween spooktacular.
Let's get down to brass tacks. There's a lot of people online are declaring this the best episode so far. Where do you land on that?
I personally think that this was one of the best episodes so far, but I still think that the previous episode is my favourite one of the series so far.
Mm-hmm.
But I loved the Malcolm in the Middle opening. I loved all the little stylistic choices they did through it, and there was a lot to chew on in this episode in terms of lore and theories and mysteries and all that good stuff.
Yeah, immediately after it, you and I exchanged a few messages where I realised, no, we're going to have to talk about this again on the next podcast. The cogs in our brains were working overtime. The works were gummed up, a la Vision's guts in episode 1. So aye, plenty to get into here, but I kind of agree. I think the previous episode was still my favourite one. I think maybe part of that, though, is because it was set in the 80s. And, of course, that was the era that I grew up in, so it hit all my right nostalgia buttons. That said, though, this episode did, of course, have Wanda and Vision in kind of mock-up charity shop versions of their classic Bronze Age costumes, which was also a treat in a different way.
It was pretty special to see, actually. And Quicksilver as well. It was, yeah, I think it was a really nice touch by the writers to throw those in.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved how cheap they looked as well. You know, they didn't have them suddenly dressed in fully functioning superhero costumes. They were just total, like, pound shop versions.
Yeah, it was pretty beautiful. It was exactly the quality of costume that I might just have been able to shuffle together when I was a kid. So it was pretty good. One of the things I really enjoyed about that, though, was it really just amped up the fact that as great as some of these costumes look on a comic book page, you realise that in order to do them faithfully, they will look utterly ridiculous on screen.
Absolutely.
And that goes right down to the hairstyles. I mean, we have to talk about Quicksilver's hair, which was absolutely spectacular and faithful to how he is portrayed in the classic comics, but you realise just how utterly ludicrous that works on an actual human being.
Totally. I mean, people talk about how when the first X-Men movie came out, they were like, people complained that they were just all wearing like black leather and looking a bit Matrixy, and there was even a joke about yellow spandex, and you know, people like clamouring for the classic costumes.
Why isn't Hugh Jackman wearing wings on his head, with each one 3 times the size of his forehead? That's how Wolverine's supposed to look. It's like, mate, this is why, because it looks absolutely nonsensical.
I wonder if a little touch of them having that was like the writers and the producers, and I guess it all goes back up to Kevin, doesn't it? Just saying, look, if we ever don't have an exact version of a superhero costume in one of our movies, this is why. Deal with it.
One of the things that occurred to me during this episode, I don't know for sure what the original schedule was supposed to be for this show, but I know it was pushed back. Do you think this was meant to coincide with Halloween when they wrote this?
I think so.
It was just a stray thought that occurred to me. Maybe this was meant to coincide with Halloween. It would have been quite nice if that had happened, but whatever. It's a treat regardless.
Because Wandavision was originally, I believe, slated to air kind of autumn or at least kind of later 2020, so the timeline works out. So we begin the episode with the Malcolm in the Middle intro. I watched Fat Man Beyond with Kevin Smith and Mark Bernardin talking about this episode, and they have like a live chat when they're doing it, and my god, the number of people who didn't know that that was Malcolm in the Middle,
Really?
who were throwing out guesses of, well, what could this have been? Like, are you fucking serious?
I'll be honest though, I've never seen Malcolm in the Middle apart from having subtitled repeats of it in the last couple of years, so I would not have got that reference either.
The other Breaking Bad prequel?
Yes, yeah. What a tragic life Walt had. Before we move on, actually, just on that point, do you think it's a bit strange that they accelerated in the timeline so quickly to Malcolm? Because Malcolm in the Middle's what, like 2000?
Yeah, it started in 2000.
So they effectively missed the entire 90s. I wonder, like, I'm kind of wondering if there's a generation of people who grew up in the 90s are a bit upset about that. I feel like I would be, see if they'd missed the 80s, I would be fucking livid.
But you know, the 80s had that the 90s didn't really? It was family sitcoms.
I guess, yeah, Friends was probably the biggest sitcom.
And it wasn't about a family.
I suppose you had your Frasier, which was not quite a family sitcom.
Yeah, and then Seinfeld, not about a family.
True, that's a good point. I do think, nonetheless, that Malcolm in the Middle was an inspired choice, because having Quicksilver perform that role, I mean, he's effectively the surrogate older brother in this scenario.
Yep.
And I know the older brother in Malcolm Middle was a bit of a douchebag, so I feel like that's a pretty perfect foil. By the way, before we go any further, I have to just call out immediately, Evan Peters is so perfectly cast for this role. I mean, obviously there is the stunt casting and the fact that he was Quicksilver previously, but he brings a very specific kind of energy to these sort of roles that I feel like you could not possibly have cast this better, regardless of whether you were playing around with the Quicksilver reference.
No, yeah, he absolutely lights up the screen. He's got douchebag charisma for days.
Yeah,
He's so good at it. He does a lot in this episode. I didn't quite appreciate in the first watch how much he's doing, but when I rewatched it, I was like, oh, but we'll come to that.
More on that later.
We open up on, is it Tommy or Billy? Because there's a joke about that in the show later, and I can't remember.
There is, and I don't know either, and I feel like the other thing, my other disclaimer here is, the characters of Wiccan and Speed are after my time as far as being a comic reader is concerned, so I don't know which is which, and as far as I only know these two characters from the Wandavision miniseries from the 80s when they were literally tiny kids, and so anything beyond that, I'm just like, there's nothing that makes these characters memorable to me, so I can never, I'm not sure which is which, basically. Too long, didn't read.
To give the impression that someone around here does research, I can confirm that Billy is Wiccan and Tommy is Speed.
Okay, thanks for that, Hamiltron.
Billy Wiccan and Tommy Speed were two of the undersung original Napalm Death members.
Is that a hip Napalm Death reference for the kids?
Both are now tending their allotments in suburbs of Birmingham.
So yeah, we open with Billy telling us about Halloween, and it's a classic sitcom opening. He's talking straight to the camera. His twin brother Tommy basically acts like he's the dork. We get little Malcolm in the Middle style flashbacks to why he's a quote-unquote Dorkosaurus Rex. His response of, that's not even a real dinosaur, is pretty great.
That's pretty good, yeah.
We see our boy Petro passed out on the sofa, sleeping at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'm like, big pandemic energy, I feel you, man.
Evan Peters Quicksilver is the hero that lockdown deserves.
And there's some funny back and forth about you're scared of him because he's a vampire, because he's sleeping at 4 in the afternoon. Mm-hmm. And then they stick the key into the ignition and they just turn on the Pietro gear, and from this point on he is like he's at 10 for like the next 10 or 15 minutes of this show.
Yeah. Full on Billy Whiz. That's a Beano reference for anyone who understands that.
Man, we had Chuckle Vision last episode. We've got the Beano this episode.
The Beano is a long-running British children's comics. For anyone who doesn't know, Billy Whiz is a character who runs very fast.
Very different from Oink, which we also spoke about recently.
Yeah, we're hitting all the bases.
We're hitting all the bases for British people who are about our age.
Yeah. Well, we have to keep it as general as possible. I'm glad that we're not getting too specific with this podcast.
This is when we get the reveal of the costumes, as Wanda comes down the stairs dressed as quote-unquote a Sokovian fortune teller.
Now, I'm sorry, but as cheap as that costume looks, it looks great.
It does look great.
I will never not love the wimple on Scarlet Witch. Bring back the wimple.
Hashtag bring back the wimple. Get it,
hey,
get
you,
it trending,
she's having
guys.
a wimple. References to 1980s fast food restaurant adverts. We've got it all.
I've got this wrapped up. I mean, we're talking about Wandavision, which is in itself, it's mining nostalgia to a certain degree, so all we're doing is we're jumping on the bandwagon.
This is where we get to just pass off our inability to make modern references as being very clever and meta.
Then Vision comes down the stairs, and for every ounce of Scarlet Witch's costume that looks mildly ridiculous, Vision's looks 100 times more so.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of fobbed off as being what's the correct term, Greg?
A luchador.
A luchador. This little exchange between Vision and Scarlet Witch, where it's clear at this point that he's off book as far as she's concerned, and there's a little bit of trying to keep it together, but you can tell that something is rotten in Denmark. I really loved that, like when he says he's going to go out to the neighbourhood watch, and she says, "You're not supposed to do that," and then stops, and he's like, "Hmm?"
Yeah, that was pretty good.
When she says, "I appreciate you wearing that costume," and he says, "Well, there was nothing else in my closet."
Right.
And then there's that awkward pause, and he's just like, "Ah, yeah." So it's clear from the get-go. And if it wasn't clear enough, it's then in a direct-to-camera cutaway by Billy or Tommy. It says that Wanda and Vision have been arguing, not exactly arguing, but things haven't quite been the same. And at this point, while he's talking to the camera, just out of focus in the background, we can see Pietro looking at him funny.
Yes, yeah.
In a kind of "what are you doing" way, which is our first sign that Pietro is, to some degree, self-aware in this scenario.
Yeah, we see as the episode goes on that he definitely has more of an awareness of this situation. More on that later, because I do have more to say about that.
You have thoughts?
I do.
And then we get possibly my favourite scene in the show, which was another little early 2000s Malcolm in the Middle style flashback to when Wanda and Pietro were children going trick-or-treating in Sokovia, with the Civil War happening in the background.
Now, that cutaway was funny, right? But what is it with US popular culture that anything that's set in Europe, it's like their idea of anything European is Europe is just always stuck in a perpetual Middle Ages. Because all the mise en scène here, the costume design, the production design, it's like nowhere looks like this for the last 100 years.
Also, no offence to our American viewers, but Americans claim Halloween as like a very American holiday. It's a Scottish holiday, okay? Look it up. It's Samhain. It's, as Lemmy put it once, if you're going out trick-or-treating and you're not Scottish, it's cultural appropriation. I'm sorry to tell you that. Also, it's called guising.
I was just about to say, it's guising or going out in the galoshes. And if you go out and you just expect to be treated without performing a wee routine or telling a wee joke, then you're rubbish at it.
Yeah, and you certainly don't go out looking to smash people's houses up if they don't give you a Mars bar.
That's trick-or-treat nonsense that we've imported from the States is pure capitalism in action. Back in our day, James, when we were growing up, we had more of a communal spirit.
I was going to say, to be fair though, back in our day, you had to go out and work to get rewarded, so maybe guising is more capitalist than trick-or-treating.
It was about community though, that was the point.
Yeah.
It's about mutual aid. Entertainment is a valuable thing in any community. It bonds communities. This is a tangent I did not expect us to go on.
Hang on, just going to rig the tangent klaxon, here we go.
Tangentine dream. That was the previous episode. Damn it. That reference doesn't work.
It's alright, we've got a lot to say this episode that we both forgot last episode.
That's true, yeah. But yeah, there is a case to be made, I guess, that expecting kids to perform the labour of entertainment purely for the entertainment of adults, yeah, you could say it is a bit questionable. Maybe we can just come down the middle and say maybe neither of these is a perfect way to run a tradition.
We're going to sit on the fence for this one. Halloween, firmly on the
once
fence.
again, this fence is mighty comfortable.
Yeah. We are the Lib Dems of podcasts.
Yeah, that'll definitely be the takeaway of anyone who's listened to any of our F Democracy tangents. They'll come away to, these guys are definitely the Lib Dems of podcasts.
They're pretty centrist, these guys.
Anyway, moving on.
Vision leaves, and then Pietro asks Wanda if they've got any water balloons. She says they don't, and he says, well, what are we going to do with all this shaving cream then? And like a really glorious little man-child moment. We see him saying that if they're going to go out trick-or-treating, he says Billy doesn't even have a costume. Tommy says, I'm Tommy, and he says, yeah, and don't you forget it. Possibly alluding to the fact that we're all going to forget what kids what.
Yes, yeah. Or possibly that post this whole thing, after Wanda's, presumably at some point, Wanda's grip on Westview is going to be relinquished. Is there a possibility that people might have amnesia afterwards? Is that a possible outcome of this?
I didn't think of that. Good catch.
And perhaps specifically in reference to the kids, because the kids have huge question marks over them, because first of all, where did they even come from, right? And second of all, are they going to remain Wanda's kids after this, or is she going to have to go through the trauma of having them ripped away from her, as indeed happened in the comics?
I wonder about that. I wonder
you wonder
about that.
About that.
Quick aside, as I mentioned last time when we were talking about Wandavision, this wasn't like an insightful thing I noticed. It's pretty obvious, but I did mention it, that more possibly than any other character in the Avengers, in any of the Infinity Saga, Wanda has had so much tragedy piled on her. They add on to that the idea for children being taken from her at the end of this. It seems a bit overkill on Wanda.
Maybe.
Bastards.
Yeah. There has been, by the way, I've seen quite a lot of criticism about the treatment of Wanda in the MCU generally, and in fact I might come to this later as we're wrapping up, because there's some good points to end on here with regards just wrapping up the analysis of this episode and where it might go. But I have seen some quite what I think is quite coherent criticism against the MCU's basically treatment of Wanda as she gets a lot of shit thrown at her, and her whole purpose now is she's now angry about it, which, fair play, you cannot blame her for being angry about it, but it's like she's basically gone from a kind of sort of two-dimensional, maybe some you could even argue one-dimensional presence in the MCU, where she's basically just there to occasionally be a backup member during the battle scenes, but otherwise just have a lot of terrible shit happen to her. And she's gone from that to being a protagonist, but she's a protagonist who, while what she's doing is quite remarkable in terms of her power, she's cast herself in this role that in a way sort of belittles her status. I mean, she's effectively cast herself as a housewife. Not that there's anything wrong with being a housewife, but compared to being an Omega level super being, you know what I mean? And I've seen a lot of people say, well, is this really the best way to treat this character? And we won't really know until we see what the denouement is of this series. So I guess we just have to wait and see. But I think I do think it's a perfectly legitimate form of criticism that some people have about this show.
I think so, but because I do think she gets a lot of shit, and also it's a heavy-handed way of making you sympathetic for her when she is an antagonist. Because as I told you, via text messages over the weekend. I rewatched Endgame. Still think it's a solid movie. Others disagree. It really stood up for me for the second time watching it, but I totally noticed the second time. One, Wanda does basically almost single-handedly wreck Thanos at the end, and two, during Tony Stark's funeral scene. Sorry, spoilers for Endgame if you've not seen it.
Spoiler: Mr. Stark ends up not feeling so good.
During Tony Stark's funeral, everyone's giving it all boo-hoo over Tony Stark, and everyone's giving it all boo-hoo over Black Widow, and no one really cares that Vision's dead. Because Vision's the other one that doesn't come back, and literally no one, with the exception of Hawkeye, giving her a pat on the back, gives a fuck about Vision being dead. So you could see why maybe she might fall into such depths of grief when she apparently doesn't even have the support of those people who are supposed to be her backup. They're supposed to have her back at all times. And the only guy that has her back at all is the guy who just gets forgiven for being a mass murderer for 5 years.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a whole other podcast.
I will actually just insert here, I was going to leave this to the end, but you've actually just segued nicely to a point where I can just put it in here. Sharonda J. Brown, who is an editor and writer at Wear Your Voice magazine, she's a great writer, she's a great follower on social media. She has been watching this show and getting really frustrated with it, and 50% enjoying it and 50% hating it. And she said, I'll just quote actually, she said, "What WandaVision highlights for me is a problem I've had with the MCU for over a year now. The films have never let the women be powerful or centred in the narratives in the way that they deserve to be. This show actually just drives home the fact that Wanda and Captain Marvel could have handled Thanos. Furthermore, Gamora was supposed to be the fiercest woman in the galaxy, and her relationship with her sister and her father was far more interesting than anything to do with Peter Quill. This is why the 11 seconds of girl power on the battlefield in Endgame is so insulting." I have to say, I kind of agree with that.
Hashtag girls get it done.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I kind of agree with that. I mean, I'm not as harsh on this show as I think Sharonda Brown is being, but I see totally where she's coming from. And the point about Endgame was one of the things I actually found annoying about it. I did feel like including Scarlet Witch's, not yet Scarlet Witch's involvement in the final battle with Thanos did feel very perfunctory to me, and I do feel like the female characters generally are quite underserved in the way that she's describing here. And so I kind of feel like, on the one hand, I'm really enjoying the fact, as I mentioned in our previous episode, I'm really enjoying the fact that Wanda has the space now, and Elizabeth Olsen has the space to breathe life into this character. It is frustrating, though, on the other hand, that it's being done in a way where she's not actually interacting with the real world. And that the only way so far that this character has had any real agency is as a product of her own pocket universe, where she is a tyrant who has to be taken down. I do think there is a problematic aspect to that.
Going back to the hashtag girls get it done moment, that's a boys reference if anyone didn't pick up on that. That whole little segment seems really odd to me as well for the reason that moments before, a couple of minutes maybe tops in the movie before, Captain Marvel's just appeared and single-handedly destroyed Thanos' mothership in about 5 seconds by flying through it. And then Spider-Man hands her the Infinity Gauntlet and he's like, how are you going to get it through them? And really her response should just be, I just flew through a spaceship.
Yeah, were you not watching?
Watch me get this to the van in about a second, flying at hyperspeed, destroying everything in my path. Anyway.
And that's another thing. I know I said this last episode, but that should have been Monica Rambeau. God damn it.
I'm sure it will be at some point. But also, another good tweet I saw about WandaVision was someone tweeted, everyone's talking about who's going to be the big bad in WandaVision, and I'm like, isn't grief enough?
Oh, nice.
I was like, yep, grief is the big bad.
This episode, in fact, does hammer home that theme quite a bit, but there's certain points in here where I do think it hits that theme in a way that I think is really effective. I mean, it's very... None of it's subtle, right? No one can ever accuse the MCU of being too subtle, but I think it does explore that theme in some quite effective ways, this episode.
They go out trick-or-treating. This is for our American audience out there. Thank you, American listeners. Where was I? Yeah, they go out. Herb's there with his ludicrous Neighbourhood Watch earpiece. Again, Herb seems like he has that kind of self-awareness as well to a degree.
Yeah, I'm not sure about Herb. He does seem like he does have a bit more awareness than some of the other characters, and we kind of suspected that was the case with Agnes as well. More on her later.
And while this is all going on, there's some funny scenes of, like, Pietro's running around causing havoc with the kids, while Herb says, wait a minute, he's doing what? And then it happens, which I also thought was a bit weird, because Herb says something, then it happens, rather than the other way around. Mm-hmm. But that could just be for comic effect.
Right, yeah, it's a difficult one to kind of parse with that one, because that is a technique that you could see being used in one of those sitcoms, but there is always that thing in your mind. Is that suggesting he has some degree of control or foresight as to what's happening here?
Prepare the Scottish word klaxon, Craig, because meanwhile, out with the hex. They're bringing the missile back that Wanda threw at Hayward. He wants it seen to, he wants results within the hour, and he's getting a lot of shit from Rambo.
Don't push me.
Darcy gives him some shit, and he turns around and says to Darcy, do you work for me? And her response is, I don't actually know.
yeah.
It's brilliant.
We've all been there.
When Monica says that she works for her, he says, which one of you is the sassy best friend? There's some good back and forth here. But Hayward is a dick. There's a brief moment in this scene, like a brief flash of a moment where you're kind of like, and then you're like, no, you're still a dick. And it's when he comes out with the whole, those of you that went away in the blip don't know what it was like for those 5 years and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, did you have a rough time? Fuck you. You're still a dick.
Yeah, no, totally. Hayward is, I would not say he's an interesting character. He's pretty much a cookie-cutter antagonist. And I guess the MCU needs those. It's had a rich supply of them across all its various properties. And that's fine. He doesn't necessarily need to be anything else. I have seen some theories online about whether maybe Hayward is a Hydra agent, or if maybe some people are saying, is he possibly a Skrull? Which would be an interesting twist, because so far in the MCU the Skrull have been kind of defanged. They were kind of presented as being sort of goofy, so that could be a twist. But in all honesty, I think I would be surprised that Hayward turned out to be anything as interesting or as integral as that. I feel like at this point he's just a dickhead, and that's probably enough to service this story. But I guess we'll see. I mean, if he does turn out to be a Hydra agent or anything else, I feel like it wouldn't be the best piece of writing in the MCU, because it's been telegraphed so hard that this guy is not to be trusted. So I don't know what that would really add to the story.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that he is just the cipher needed to get things going. It's like, here's the guy who's pretty much a dick, probably one of the bad guys, but he does it well. The actor does it really well.
It's all perfectly serviceable stuff. One of the things, though, that I'm glad the show keeps mining the idea of the trauma from the blip. And obviously the theme of trauma is very big, very integral to this entire show. But the trauma about the blip itself, I'm glad that they're exploring that. And obviously, was it episode 4 where we first met Monica? And we get to see what happened when she blipped, and then she comes back and finds out her mother's dead, and there's all the chaos of people kind of being physically reassembled. I really enjoyed all that stuff, and I'm glad they're exploring that, because it's something that Endgame did not convey at all. It was kind of, well, people have disappeared, now they're back. It's like, okay then. So I'm glad we're getting to explore the emotional weight of all of that stuff.
I don't know, man. When I rewatched Endgame over the weekend, the blip was shown as being not a great time. And like there's the whole bit of like Captain America having the meetings, and you get the Russo brothers in there. In their little cameo and stuff, but it's really shown as like a traumatic event. The world looks fucked.
I didn't feel it conveyed that to me, really. But there's so much going on in that movie. It's a busy movie that already lasts, 5 years? One blip in length, approximately.
But what I thought, and I know it's a different movie and I know it's a different tone, but there does need to be some sort of tonal consistency across the movies. I thought, like in Spider-Man Far From Home, it's presented as kind of just a throwaway comedy moment. Like when you see like the band appearing in the middle of a basketball game and stuff, and they're like, "Oh, it's been the
right." And that movie is fresh in my mind because I saw it for the first time fairly recently, whereas I've not seen the Endgame since I saw it at the cinema. So yeah, that's maybe not helping my perspective on this.
Yeah, so you're right. I think it's good that they're really sort of digging into that idea that what would you have been like if your loved ones had literally disintegrated and then 5 years later just reappeared? You'd probably be a bit of a Hayward.
Oh man, I'd like to think not.
I say you'd be a bit of a Hayward.
You specifically.
I'd be fine, but you'd be fucked. So Hayward kicks our three amigos off the base, has them arrested, and then of course they do the classic, we're not getting arrested, fight their way out of the guards, and they sneak into a little room, and Darcy gets her hack on.
Now, I had some thoughts about this. I think you know where I'm going. Seeing Darcy getting her hack on, you know what she needed? She needed to get in touch with her secret hacker sister, Darlene Alderson, and they could have hacked this place together, because, let's face facts, Kat Dennings and Carly Chaikin, it's absurd they've never been cast as sisters, and we need to make this happen. Hollywood, are you listening?
I mean, we know you're probably not, but if you are, you're right, it's absurd. They look like sisters.
Even their mannerisms are similar. It's like, this is just insane. And in my head canon, in the universe where the Mr. Robot universe takes place in the same universe as the MCU, we already know that White Rose's machine is responsible for the birth of mutants. That's what's going to happen at the end of this show. And the information that was in Magda Alderson's safety deposit box that we never ever saw, and it was just a wonderful red herring / MacGuffin in season 4. What was in there was actually documents proving the existence of another Alderson sibling, and that Alderson sibling is, of course, Darcy Lewis.
It's all tied up in a bow, guys. As we said last week, the Esmail verse is in the MCU now, because everything is part of the MCU.
Yeah, the mouse has taken over everything.
Hey, Pluto, I'm gonna hack E-Core.
Fuck society, haha!
We are Evil Core. Who'd have thunk it? Look how expensive my watch is, Pluto. More on that later.
You want to watch me piss, haha!
Right, so yeah, Darcy hacking. She does some hacksawing while Monica and Jimmy are like, yep, we're going to go meet Monica's aerospace engineer buddy. Still unrevealed as to the name.
Yeah, so are we still on the Reed Richards train? Or do you have an alternate theory?
Well, Craig, I'm glad you asked me that.
Yep, here we go.
Because...
should I wind up the hot take, Claxon?
It's not really a hot take, it's something I read someone else say,
okay.
So...
Shall I wind up someone else's hot take, Claxon?
Wind up the lukewarm take, Claxon. In the Spanish subtitles for this show, in the previous episode when Monica mentions her aerospace engineer friend, it's in the feminine.
Ooh. Now that is interesting.
So there is an assumption that she is referring to a lady. So it could be Sue Storm, Invisible Girl / lady, or is it Riri Williams?
Yeah, maybe. But as a subtitler, I have to step in here and remind you or inform you out there who do not know this. Quite often when people are theorising about TV shows and they look at the subtitles for clues, it's a waste of time. Because subtitlers do not have any information that you don't have. It's not a subtitler's job to be informed by the writer and director of a TV show or a movie. We do not have access to that kind of information.
Wait, you telling me you don't have a hotline to Hollywood?
Believe it or not, no.
What the fuck are we doing this podcast for then, Craig?
When subtitlers are subtitling things and there's information that's unconfirmed, quite often you just have to take your best guess. So I am going out on a limb and saying that the person who did that subtitle, the fact that they made it the feminine was just a guess.
So let's just say, as a professional subtitler, you're disgusted by their lack of commitment to their job of getting those subtitles out there properly.
Well, I would be condemning myself as well, because that's just what you do. You don't have any choice. There's nothing you can do in that situation. You just have to make your best guess. Here's a good example, and we have to do this every episode, James. Go get the klaxon ready. It's a Twin Peaks reference. In Twin Peaks, The Missing Pieces, there is that great scene where we see Philip Jeffries at his hotel. There's the guy who's helping him with his case up the stairs. And when Philip Jeffries returns from his sojourn in a different time and space to meet up with Gordon Cole and Dale Cooper, he rematerializes on the stairs of the hotel. And the guy who's helped him up the stairs is in a state of shock. And the shit is coming out his ass. And in the subtitles, and this is a perfect example of what I'm talking about, in the subtitles, when the guy shouts, "Ayúdame," which is Spanish for help me, right? But whoever subtitled it did not know that and thought the guy was saying, "Are you the man?" And that is what the subtitles say. And that's a classic example of a subtitler just hears something, not realizing the person is speaking another language. And so they just put in what they think the person is saying. And there was Twin Peaks subreddits going, but wait, in the subtitles it says he's saying, "Are you the man?" So how does this guy know who Philip Jeffries is? What does it mean? It's like, no, guys, he doesn't. He was saying, "Help me."
Okay, good to know. So
you cannot rely on subtitles to give you clues like this. The character in question could turn out to be a woman, but I can absolutely 100% cast iron guarantee you that the feminine form used in those subtitles was not a clue to that effect. The subtitler would not have known.
So you're saying there's a chance?
I'm saying there's a chance it could be a woman, but it wouldn't be one forecast by those subtitles.
Oh, on an unrelated note though, but while I remember, I saw a thing that said there might actually be a secret 10th episode of WandaVision.
Ooh.
I can't remember where I saw it, but someone saw the original slate for this series and it said 10 episodes.
Interesting.
And there's a week between the end of WandaVision and the start of Falcon and the Winter Soldier in the same time slot on Disney Plus, where neither of those shows are. And I wonder if it's going to be like they're going to do a post-credits episode.
Right.
But we'll see. I might just be wishful thinking on my part. I really
once
wish
again,
there was
though,
more.
you know, there is always the possibility that it was just a mistake.
I've got a little Sherlock Holmes hat on here. I've got my spyglass.
One of the both wonderful and frustrating things about the internet is that people get so excited about spotting these things and they develop all kinds of fantastic theories, and then sometimes it turns out it was just a mistake.
Fantastic Four theories.
Hey.
So they do them a hack. Hear Mr. Robot music, get demonetized.
More on that later.
Jimmy and Monica drive off, and we go back into the Hex.
Mm-hmm. Hex-Men. Wait a minute. Is that how they're going to end up being called the X-Men? So, going back to a theory that maybe Wanda is going to be responsible for the birth of mutants, are the X-Men going to originally be called the Hex-Men? But maybe somebody mishears it and says X-Men? I would not put that past the MCU.
That's a good idea. Stick a pin in that. We'll come back to that one in a few episodes. Meanwhile, back in Westview, Vision's doing himself a wander around the outskirts of town. And the further he goes, the less is happening, literally, with people.
I found this scene really disturbing. That woman standing there with the tear.
Never finishing hanging the ghost
I
up.
found that deeply unpleasant, sort of horrifying on quite an existential level. I think the fact that it is, obviously the landscape used, all of the production design, it was suburbia to the max. And there is just something about that landscape that it just cries the death of the human spirit. And so that woman frozen there in the act of not quite putting up a ghost. There's just so many metaphors at work there that I thought they were just delicious and painful.
It was a really horrifying scene, and not in a sort of spooky scary way, just in a genuinely unsettling way.
The sweet irony of the fact that Vision being an android is the most human presence there. Like everyone else is just frozen in time, and he's the one who's kind of striving for life.
Yeah, deal with that, Data. Star Trek reference.
Deal with that, Zuckerberg.
Our Vision gets to the outskirts of town, sees a car just stopped. And who's in the car?
It's our Agnes. Now, I have thoughts. So I did mention on our previous episode that it had occurred to me that maybe the name Agnes was maybe a reference to Agatha Harkness. And I feel like either the writers are just playing with me here by dressing her up as a witch, because it's just so on the nose. They definitely know that people like me are thinking this. So I don't know, man. But what sways me off it is the fact that it does seem here like Agnes is very much a victim. She and I don't like, even though we've seen Agnes demonstrate some kind of awareness. Right here, she seemed like a victim. She was not someone in control. That much was clear. She was desperate, and so I don't think if this is Agatha Harkness, then she's not being set up as any kind of big bad. I don't think. I think if this is Agatha Harkness, if that's going to be the reveal, instead what might happen is, rather than her being a villain in the first instance, that maybe there's some kind of future journey that post this she then looks for some way to regain control of her life, sort of thing, and that leads her down the dark path. I would love it if there was some larger role for Catherine Hahn post this movie, because she is so good. She's such a watchable actor, and I really love the energy she brings to this show. I think she could make a really entertaining antagonist further down the line. I've become seduced by this idea now that I really want it to be the case, so I'm now just trying to find ways that for Agnes to be Agatha Harkness. I just think it would be a lot of fun. On that note, actually, I also mused that maybe Mephisto could be involved here, and maybe that was the relation to Agatha Harkness. I think I've reevaluated that now. I'm now thinking that perhaps what might be a cool thing to happen would be for Mephisto to be drawn to Wanda after the events of this show, and Mephisto to say, "Oh, this person is quite powerful, and she clearly has weaknesses that I could exploit." And maybe that's what leads to the events of the Doctor Strange movie.
Is it possible that that has happened already, and he has been drawn to her, and he's exploiting her, and he's making her more powerful so that he can feed on your magic?
Maybe. I mean, that was my original, not quite, I wasn't committed to it, but that was my original thought, that maybe that was the case.
Because that advert
Right, yes.
with the shark,
Yep.
like, it's a snack for survivors, I'm feeding on your magic. It's like, okay, that is so on the nose.
It is, yeah, you're right.
Or is Wanda feeding on Agatha Harkness's magic? Did Agatha Harkness get in over her head, and now she's like, I fucked this, I can't deal with this kind of thing?
Maybe, but
don't
I
know.
feel like that would be a lot to convey to the audience without just relying on pure exposition. So that's what makes me think probably not. But I mean, narratively, it sort of makes sense. I don't think so. I just feel like it would be too much to pack in at the end. It would just be too much information. But who knows? It's possible. I don't think it's impossible.
It's a curious thing, though. I don't know if that advert was a really obvious clue or a massive red herring.
What I know is that it was deeply fucking harrowing, that I can tell you.
It was so disturbing.
It also made me think of just, like, maybe it's a reflection of Wanda's own kind of inner psyche, the fact that she has felt helpless in the wake of Vision's death for so long, and then maybe that's and that sort of level of devastation is what led to her current mindset, and that led to this entire becoming effectively a supervillain. I guess that's the other thing. We still don't quite yet know how all of these things are possible. How is it that Wanda is suddenly capable of all of this stuff? I mean, I guess it was always just untapped potential, but is it just her trauma that's resulted in her being able to access that level of power?
As Pietro says to her in the town square scare, she's come quite a long way from giving people nightmares and doing hand-wavy red beams. But before we get there, though, Catherine Hahn does get a good moment of breaking from the illusion, and she recognises Vision as Vision the Avenger.
Yes, yeah.
And I love it where she's like, "Oh my god, you're Vision, you're an Avenger, are you here to help us?" And he's like, "Yes, I'm Vision, I'm going to help you." What's an Avenger?
Well, yeah, that was pretty perfect. It was a classic Bettany delivery as well. Really disturbing though the way Agnes just shouts at him, "You're dead!"
Yeah.
I found that quite harrowing.
She's dressed as a witch, screaming it at him, and then she just starts cackling, "All is lost." Like, come on. She's a
Right,
witch. She's an actual witch,
yeah.
surely.
That's where I'm like, if you don't follow through this Agatha Harkness thing, I'm gonna yeet that entire writer's room for fucking with me.
If Catherine Hahn has just been cast as playing someone who's stuck in this with no bigger role to play, I'm going to suggest we organise an 8 o'clock doorstep clap for Catherine Hahn.
That's a callback to our previous episode.
So, Quicksilver / Pietro is completely aware of almost everything that's happening until Wanda asks him, "What happened to your accent?" He says, "What happened to yours?" And then he says, "Oh, it gets a bit fuzzy. I get shot in the street like a chump, and then I woke up here." And I think that might be just a little kind of like savage dig at Joss Whedon's poor handling of the character. More on him later. But he does know a lot, and he's congratulating Wanda on how good she's doing.
There's a lot of questions about Quicksilver, and clearly we're meant to have a lot of questions. Here's some of the things that were occurring to me while I was watching this. Between episodes 5 and 6, I was sitting thinking to myself, is he going to have powers for a start? Is it going to be confirmed that this is definitely Quicksilver? He has the powers and everything. Well, we've seen he does have the powers. So what gives with that? We talked quite a bit about the multiverse possibility. That perhaps the fact that Evan Peters has been cast in this role, because obviously he's the same actor who played that role in the Fox version of the X-Men franchise. And so we were thinking, well, is that confirmation that this is a multiverse affair that incorporates that franchise? I'm not so sure now that's the case, because I think of what we've seen with this version of Quicksilver, that he's not the same character as appears in those movies. Personality-wise, he's quite different. However, of course, he's also personality-wise quite different from the way that Aaron Taylor-Johnson played the role back in Age of Ultron, and I'm not just referring to the accent. More on that in a bit. He also, here's the thing that really struck me in this episode about Quicksilver. He's asking an awful lot of questions, and it's almost as if he's either fishing for information or he's possibly needling away at Wanda looking for a specific kind of response. I don't know which, but I just think it's kind of weird that there is something a wee bit off about him, and not just the obvious he's been resurrected with a different face kind of way. There's just something a wee bit kind of, what is he after? What is going on in his mind? He seems to have his own agenda with Wanda. When Wanda had that flash as well of seeing, I'm just going to call it zombie Quicksilver, even the zombie version was not Aaron Taylor-Johnson, you know, it was still Evan Peters. And obviously Wanda remembers her brother dying when he was Aaron Taylor-Johnson. So I just thought it was quite interesting that even though she was clearly having the recognition that her brother had died, she was still seeing this version of him.
I'm hoping that in the next episode, at least, that we get more on that. Because I'd say that, fuck it, I could run with this mystery for about 5 seasons, man. Make it The Return. 3 seasons, WandaVision, The Return.
Directed by David Lynch. Oh, is that what Unrecorded Night is?
Yes, David Lynch is finally in the MCU.
Yeah. Westview, The Return. Oh, by the way, call back to the witch thing of earlier. The town is called Westview, and we also know that there's a place called Eastview because the cops in episode 4 say that they're from there. So is that a Wicked Witch reference? Is Wanda the Witch of the West, and Agnes is going to be the Wicked Witch of the East?
Could be. Just they could have gone full on season 4 of Fargo, and this is just a Wizard of Oz retelling. So yeah, he does it. He needles at her a bit, and that's when we cut back to the edge of town, and our vision is doing him a push through the hex.
Doing him a heck and hex push.
What the heck?
I did quite enjoy that it seemed to be his cape that was kind of slowing him down, which I thought was a nice spin on the trope that Alan Moore introduced in Watchmen, where one of the superheroes gets his cape caught in a door and is haplessly gunned down by a bunch of goons.
It's Dollar Bill.
Right, yeah. When here Vision you could argue he was saved by his cape.
Although for the fact that he can't really get any further later on when she expands the hex, takes a while to cover Vision.
Yeah, that's true. I wasn't quite sure what the geography was there.
I think that was just for dramatic effect more than anything else.
Yeah.
So Hayward and all his goons come a running, and Darcy comes a running, and Darcy's shouting at them to help him, and Hayward doesn't seem that bothered because I think Hayward just wants the body.
Yeah. For
some nefarious sword reason, they want that vibranium synthezoid body, and they don't care much for Vision. And I loved when Vision is just like, he shouts like help, and then there's a pause and he says help the people inside, and I was like, he's such a hero. He's such a hero. It gave me the feels, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Super Kids, we discover that little Speed's got speed, and we discover at this point that little Billy has superpowers as well, as he sees Daddy Vision breaking apart outside the hex, and Wanda goes full Wanda, blasts Quicksilver away because Quicksilver's the line that Pietro says where he's like, oh no, I sure hope that your dead husband doesn't die again.
That was pretty great.
So callous.
He kind of had it coming.
He had it coming. He had it coming.
She blasts him across the square, and then just everything freezes, and she expands the barrier of the hex out across like the entire sword encampment.
This was a delightful sequence where everything becomes a circus. Just so good.
I love the sword agents running away, immediately becoming mimes.
When that happened, as it was coming towards them, I actually shouted at the screen, "Clowns!" And then it happened, and I still burst out laughing when it happened. This whole sequence has spawned some great memes, by the way. One of my favourite ones, which I actually already sent to you, but it was a scene from the end of Twin Peaks: The Return, where Cooper and spoilers for Twin Peaks: Return, Cooper and Diane are in the car, and it's the line of when we cross, everything could be different, and then the second panel is those two sword agents being turned into clowns.
The hex expands, and you really get a sense of the power of it at that point, like the size of it, because up till now it's just been a big wall, really, you've seen, but you see this like massive shape expanding outwards. I love that they've already handcuffed Darcy to a car, and the sword agent's like, bye! She's like, oh great, thanks.
This whole sequence, this is quite a cataclysmic sequence with some quite major repercussions, quite possibly. Right, first of all, we'll start with the micro stuff, then we'll go to the macro. Right, we know Monica is changing from her journey through the hex. So I feel like this is confirmation she's going to end up with her Captain Marvel superpowers from here.
I think that's a given. Because we could say that she's going to be Miss Marvel, but we know for a fact there's going to be a Miss Marvel show. Yeah. So
I feel like that's what that's setting up. And I'm quite stoked about that.
Do you think what they're going to do is she's going to be a less powerful Captain Marvel? Do you think they've realised they've sort of shat the bed a wee bit with how powerful Captain Marvel is?
I feel, right, this is one of those things where I think now they've sort of fucked themselves a wee bit, because I don't think they've got any choice but to do that, because Captain Marvel in the MCU is a bit too powerful, because it removes all the drama.
It's the Superman problem.
It is, yeah, exactly. So I don't think they've got any choice but to depower slightly the next version of Captain Marvel. Now, I say they fucked themselves because when they do that, it's inevitably going to lead to a backlash, because, of course, the black woman has to be less powerful than the white woman. And I also think that's going to be a legitimate criticism. But they have sort of cornered themselves. I think it was a mistake, really, to make Carol Danvers as powerful as she turned out to be. But she was the inevitable Deus Ex Machina that they had to use at the end of Endgame. And clearly that was always the plan.
If she had the flying and the energy beams, you'd have been fine with that,
yes.
But they did need her to be an interstellar missile force. So.
Yeah, I feel like it was an ill-advised decision to make her as powerful as she was, but we'll see how they try and rectify that in some way. Either way, Teyonah Parris as Captain Marvel, I'm all here for it.
It'll be SJW, we all hate Brie Larson stuff going on the internet anyway.
If they hated Brie Larson, I'm sure they'll all absolutely love Teyonah Parris with no problems whatsoever. I'm sure Teyonah Parris will have a great time on social media. All of the salubrious elements of MCU fandom will welcome her in the role of Captain Marvel with open arms.
As long as she smiles enough in the role, man, because...
God, I hate people so much.
I thought that Brie Larson really should have smiled more as Captain Marvel.
Yeah, that's definitely what was missing, yeah. I can't believe anybody is a kick-ass superhero unless they do it with a ridiculous smile on their cooting at 24 hours a day. Yeah. Anyway, moving on.
As a quick aside, I just want to point out I really enjoyed the Captain Marvel movie. And I think Brie Larson's great, but I love Teyonah Parris.
I found it a middling entry in the MCU, personally. But none of it was because of Brie Larson. Brie Larson was fine.
However, I am 100% here for Teyonah Parris as Captain Marvel. Bring it on. She is an incredibly watchable presence and a great actress.
Yeah. Okay, so my other possible, what I think is another possible very weighty repercussion. Going back to the mutant origin question, back to that theory. Let's say Wanda is what gives birth to mutants in the MCU.
That's no way to talk about our two kids, man.
The mutant menace, as I believe we're supposed to call it.
Paramutants.
Paramutants. Given that there's this expansion, are we just going to see a chain reaction across the globe, and that's what gives birth to mutants? Because I feel like that would make more sense. Because I can't see all of MCU's mutants being born in Westview. I feel like that would suck.
It's like, where are you from? From Westview. Oh, you're a mutant.
Oh, you're one of them mutants. Yeah, the anti-mutant sentiment gets distilled to anti-Westview sentiment. It'd be the MCU's equivalent of anti-ginger bigotry. More important question, is Darcy going to be a mutant? And if so, is she going to join the X-Men? Because I would be all over that.
Please. Like, I really, really want her to continue. Apparently, Kat Dennings, I wondered if she was on board, if she was still on the hook for a contract and they just hadn't got back to her, or if she'd signed up for 3 Thor movies or whatever. But apparently in an interview she said she was contracted for 2 Thor movies and that was it.
Oh, wow.
And she just get the call out of the blue from Marvel, like, saying, do you want to be one of the main characters in this show? And she was like, fuck yes, put me in it.
Awesome.
So I really hope that it's the Kat Dennings.
Very elegant turn of phrase. On a more micro level, do you think next episode, now that all these characters are kind of being subsumed by this phenomenon, do you think Darcy and Jimmy Woo will be recast as sitcom characters from their own sitcoms? So Jimmy could be a restaurant owner in Westview, a la Fresh Off the Boat, and Darcy can work for him as a waitress, a la Two Broke Girls.
Do you know what? I want Darcy and Wanda to be the two broke guys.
I think that'd be a great next episode. I mean, whatever happens next, I'm probably not going to be disappointed, but I would love to see that, even if it's just one scene.
So yeah, I love her moment of being consumed by the hex. Fuck my life moment as it goes past her. Curiously, like I say, we don't see what happens to her inside it. We see all the sword agents turn into clowns. We see the used car sales plot. We see the circus stuff appear, and we see the ice cream van, and we see Vision's body reform as the hex covers him, but we don't see what happens to Darcy, so that's a mystery for next week.
Yeah, she's superpowered waitress energy. Or superpowered name will just be broke girl.
Just give it a hot waitress.
Hottie waitress, just like Sheila. Press F.
More on her later.
Before we move on, before we wrap up on WandaVision here, I just want to make a callback to our previous episode commentary. I brought up the subject of Wanda's fluctuating accent and the fact we got we got a reprise of her Sokovian accent last episode. You messaged me helpfully this week and said during your rewatch of Endgame that you realised that she actually had a flavour of Sokovian when she confronted Thanos, which leads me to believe that what she's actually doing is that same thing I do whenever I visit London, which is I get my first hint of an English accent in my ears, and I instantly become about 200% more Glaswegian, just as an unconscious self-defense mechanism. Clearly that's what Wanda is doing, and so therefore I take back everything I said earlier. Clearly it was planned all along, and it's all perfectly cromulent.
Fair play. She's just trying to look hard. We'll find out in a matter of days from where we're recording now how episode 7 goes.
One last question to ponder. Do you think Vision and Quicksilver are likely to survive beyond the end of this show? Is this a victory lap for Paul Bettany? And is there a future for... I mean, I guess the second question with Quicksilver is a bit more complex because we don't yet know what the MCU's plans are regards any possible multiverse shenanigans.
If this is a victory lap for Paul Bettany and they're killing him off at the end, I feel like they've done the character of Vision a bit dirty, because when you think of what Vision's done in the MCU, it doesn't amount to a lot. Mm-hmm. You know, he does a lift up a hammer in Age of Ultron.
Stop! Hammer time!
Then Civil War, he just sort of does a bit of floating around and then gets his ass whooped by Wanda. And then he goes out in Wakanda like a chump, to paraphrase Quicksilver.
It's an undignified fate that he has out there.
For a character as integral to the Avengers in the comics as Vision, I'd feel a bit shitty if they just killed him off. I hope that they do bring him back, and I hope that he is in at least a few more films. But, I mean, I'll be kind of pissed if this is the end. But if it is the end, it's quite a good victory lap, because Paul Bettany's really got to stretch his muscles in this show.
I suppose we could ask the same question about Wanda in the long run, because given that it seems like she's geared up to be an antagonist in the next Doctor Strange movie, does she come out of that? Does she survive at the end of Doctor Strange, do we think? Are they going to write her out of the franchise? Let's bear in mind, the reason I'm asking this question, the MCU is extremely busy. There are so many characters now.
Yeah, and they're introducing, as their movie slate for the next couple of years shows,
yeah,
quite a few more.
Yeah. So I feel like there'll be areas where they want to clear the decks a wee bit, and that makes me worried for some of these characters. It makes me worried for Wanda because I feel like obviously they've been gearing up to this storyline, but I also feel like this could be an economical way for them to write Wanda out of the franchise, and so they've got room to explore the newer characters. And it would be, I mean, it narratively it sort of makes sense, but I would find it enormously frustrating given how underserved Wanda has been in the MCU up until this show. And as I sort of alluded to earlier, it is a wee bit frustrating, as much as I'm enjoying this show, that the first time we've really got to spend any time with Wanda, she's effectively the bad guy of the story. I would love to see her be rehabilitated into the Avengers and get some of that energy, that Scarlet Witch energy that I loved from the comics when I was growing up, for her to be a solid part of the team. But I don't know how much room there's going to be to do that, given how little room previously there seemed to be for that character to be an active Avenger. Marvel, if you're listening, then just bear this in mind, eh?
Maybe they'll just shuffle her off to West Coast Avengers to hang out with Ant-Man.
Oh, wow. Jake, do you think that's in the MCU's future? They're going to splinter off with the West Coast Avengers?
I mean, both the Ant-Man movies have taken place in San Francisco.
Yeah.
So I think there could well be a West Coast Avengers. That would be pretty amazing, because then that would enable them to keep kind of the larger team. Because they've already sort of cleared house with like two of the main OG Avengers.
Yeah,
and
that's
like,
true. Yeah.
I'm not sure what Hulk's going to do, other than I know that he's due to be in She-Hulk. But in terms of other than that, don't know what's going to go on there. So fingers crossed that they stick the landing.
Yeah, well, watch this space. And Marvel, when you listen to this podcast, I want you to come back and award us the no prizes when you guess things right. All right, I think that wraps it up for WandaVision this week. We will definitely do at least one more podcast, I think, to wrap up, and maybe one before that on WandaVision. Who knows? We'll see how it goes. But certainly we have not talked our last WandaVision just yet.
Speaking of superheroes, though, did you happen to see the trailer for Zack Snyder's Justice League?
You know what? I did not, but the advent of said event did not escape my attention or awareness. Just about everybody was talking about it and or laughing about it.
The Snyder cut of an already snide movie.
Hey.
Apparently, it was originally slated to be a 4-hour miniseries on HBO Max, but now it's just going to be a 4-hour movie.
Oh, that figures.
There's, of course, one thing that everyone is laughing about, and it's...
I saw a screenshot, I know where you're going.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and assume that the screenwriters, or that Zack Snyder himself, are doing them a bit of a troll. Mm-hmm. But there is a point in the trailer where, for God knows what reason, they've brought back Jared Leto's Joker, I think just for a dream sequence or something.
Just to deliver this one line.
To deliver this one line, where he turns to Batman and says, "We live in a society where people don't care about stuff." I don't know, after I didn't even hear what the rest of the line is.
I cannot decide whether that is absolutely awful or absolutely brilliant or both.
I think it's a combination. It's my favourite thing that Zack Snyder's done.
I mean, that's a low bar. I am never going to watch this movie. That's not going to happen. But, oh my god, I really enjoyed the fact that that was a thing this week. It brought me so much joy. Like, people posting memes with that screenshot of the subtitle of the Joker saying that. I was like, what a time to be alive.
So, fair play to Zack Snyder. I probably will watch it at some point.
I figured you will watch it so I don't have to.
Yeah, I'm not going to rush it. Do you know, maybe I will. Maybe I should rush to watch it so that I can talk about it briefly in an episode, and you can just hear about it secondhand.
Speaking of Rush, R.I.P. Rush Limbaugh, rest in piss.
I've got one thing to say about Rush Limbaugh. In previous episodes of the podcast, you've mentioned that you wish that you had like some spirituality, like some religious belief. Mm-hmm. You have mentioned that before, and I don't, as a rule, feel that way. I don't feel envious of people who are very religious in any way at all, right? But in this one case, I genuinely do wish that I held Christian beliefs so that I could be assured in my soul that Rush Limbaugh is burning in hell.
As Bugs Bunny might say, I wish all Rush Limbaugh a very burning hell. Hey guys, if Rush Limbaugh hated gender-neutral bathrooms so much, why is his grave going to be one?
Listen, guys and girls and non-binaries who are listening, that you might feel bad, right? Some of you who are a bit more like kind-hearted or whatever, then maybe being Craig might feel bad about laughing at this, but just understand that there is a difference between wishing someone dead and enjoying the fact that a horrific bastard is no longer spouting his horror in the world, okay? You don't necessarily need to have wished him dead, but you can enjoy the fact that he's dead.
I would go further, to be honest. If you don't enjoy the fact that someone is evil as Rush Limbaugh is dead, then you need to reevaluate your morals, in all honesty. It should be a duty to be glad that someone like that is dead.
Like I say, you don't need to have willed him to be dead. You don't need to go, you shouldn't wish someone dead. But in this case, give yourself a break. Take the day off. Pat yourself in the back. Guy was a literal fucking scumbag. You only need to Google top 5 worst things Rush Limbaugh said or something like that, and you will, if you're not sure of who he is, you'll be appalled.
He used to revel in the deaths of homosexuals from the AIDS virus back in the day, and would read out their names in a celebratory fashion on his radio show, say as if they were all deviants who deserved to die. Fuck that guy. I'm glad he's dead. I'm only sad he did not die a good 30 odd years ago. I mean, that's the only tragedy.
He believed school shooting victims were crisis actors. He spent a long time on his radio show mocking Michael J. Fox's Parkinson's disease. Mm-hmm. This was not a good guy. This was like an absolute sewage pipe of a human being, and the fact that he is dead is brilliant.
Yeah, I saw a meme earlier on Facebook where somebody had said, "Now before you go spreading hateful comments about Rush Limbaugh following his death, then just ask yourself, are you going far enough? This man was an absolute monster. Go to town."
I saw one that said, before you go spreading hateful comments about Rush Limbaugh now that he's dead, ask yourself, are you hydrated enough first? Have a glass of water. Speaking of people who are a bit wrong,
Well, there's no shortage of those.
I mean, it have been in the news lately. We're a bit behind the mark on this because it happened a while ago, but the Mandalorian and Deadpool actress and former MMA fighter Gina Carano recently managed to talk herself out of a job with Disney Plus, looking at having her own Mandalorian spin-off Star Wars TV show, of which she would have been the star, and all she had to do
Was not be the worst human being in the world.
was maybe not compare people disagreeing with Republicans to the treatment of Jews in Nazi Germany. Yet she decided that that was something she was going to do.
Congratulations, you played yourself.
While in the employ, no less, of a company which prides itself on its image and its family-friendly, like at least to, you know, certain.
Yeah, well, there's plenty we can criticise Disney for. Let's not pretend that Disney is some arbiter of morality. It is not, but certainly it does have an image to try and uphold.
Yeah.
And it does not. It's understandable it would not want to be associated with someone who makes these kind of remarks online. So yeah, she fucked herself good style, with no one to blame but herself.
The only downside is that she's probably going to end up starring in some fucking like Fox TV produced show alongside Lawrence Fox.
Yeah, the latest is though she has teamed up with Ben Shapiro, so that's something to look forward to. They deserve each other. But I'm enjoying all the right-wing snowflakes because that's the reality, guys. Yous are the real snowflakes.
Don't say that as if right-wing people are listening to this show still at this
Just
point.
in case there are still any, or maybe this is our first episode, in case the Rush Limbaugh commentary didn't already. Just in case you're a bit slow.
You're right on about Rush Limbaugh, man, but leave Gina alone.
Yeah, I was never a fan of him particularly. I preferred his earlier work. Yeah, no, the Gina Carano stuff, it's brought out all the snowflake man babies just having an absolute meltdown, talking about cancel culture and whatnot. It's like, this is literally an example of the market deciding. And this is the thing that right-wingers, and particularly those of the more libertarian variety, love to go on about constantly. It's like, once again,
Congratulations, you played yourself.
this is it in action. If you don't like the result, then maybe you should question the system you uphold. Yeah, no, everything about it is delicious. The only problem I've got with it now, though, is that because it's been going on for so long, and I keep... See, when I'm going through Facebook, I cannot help myself. Like, I keep looking for these comments from these idiots just so I can laugh react them. And I'm now at a point where I've left so many laugh reacts on posts about Gina Carano that Facebook is now inundating me with Star Wars related suggestions for you posts, and now I'm like, oh man, did Gina Carano get the last laugh on me after all?
Gina Carano didn't, but the mouse did. This was all part of the mouse's plan. The mouse paid Gina Carano loads of money to tweet these things so that they could fire her.
Specifically for me.
Yep. There's a wee conspiracy for you.
Yep, that's one that Adam Curtis can make a documentary about.
More on him later. Gina Carano says some reprehensible stuff online, which I assume are the beliefs she holds. I don't think she's quote-unquote playing a character or anything, you know. But, you know, as far as I know, she hasn't physically enacted her horribleness to people to create a toxic and hostile and abusive environment around her in the workplace, unlike a certain self-proclaimed feminist TV and movie director and creator by the name of Joss Whedon. Now, last episode I should say, I was going to bang on about this briefly, but I had drank a lot of wine and forgot.
We sort of ran out of time. We had a lot going on.
The Hamiltron let you know our thoughts and feelings on the matter. However, that day when we had started recording, it was literally minutes after Charisma Carpenter had made her statement. Mm-hmm. So since we recorded, a lot more people have come out in support of Charisma Carpenter's statements, and as a whole in support of Ray Fisher's statements. It seems like, from what Ray Fisher was saying, Joss Whedon has massive prior on his treatment of his casts. Amber Benson, who played Tara in the show, who I have met incidentally, but I told you the story about meeting Amber Benson from Buffy the Vampire Slayer at Forbidden Planet. Went to a signing that she was doing when I was going to the pub with Ian and Roddy. Have I told you this story?
I don't know. You've certainly not told it in the podcast.
People in the podcast won't get how funny it is because it's an Ian-centric story.
Oh, I see, yeah.
I told them that I'd go get my Buffy the Vampire Slayer magazine signed by Amber Benson and meet them at Mono, right? And the queue was massive, right? You know where Forbidden Planet is, obviously. Yeah, so the queue was right down...
Or was, rather.
Yeah, it was right down Buchanan Street.
Holy
so
shit.
It was a long-ass fucking queue. Because I think she was doing it the day after the season 6 episode, spoilers for Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the season 6 episode where she gets shot. So there was and Buffy was a huge show at the time. I loved it. Still do, but so it took me a long time to actually get into the shop, and Amber Benson was only supposed to be there for 2 hours to do signings, but there were so many people that she stayed there for longer so she could get everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So I must have been about 2.5 hours from queuing to getting into the shop, to meeting her real briefly, saying, hey, really nice to meet you, thanks for signing it, don't want to take up too much of your time. Was like, yeah, met Amber Benson, and then went up to Mono, and I got to Mono, and Roddy was there on his own, and I was like, where's Ian? And he's like, Ian went looking for you because you took so long. And Ian came in about an hour later, and we're like, what happened? And Ian was like, I stood in the queue and ended up meeting Amber Benson, and I was like, sorry, I don't have anything for you to sign. And she just looked at me and said, geez, man.
That is fantastic.
Anyway, that's my
Terrific.
Amber Benson story. Amber Benson has come out in support of Charisma Carpenter's statement, backed everything up she said. When asked about it, Sarah Michelle Gellar has said that her statement was slightly vague, but very, very telling. She said she supports everyone's allegations. And she said, while she is particularly proud of her legacy as being involved with Buffy the Vampire Slayer, she says, I would rather my legacy not involve Joss Whedon. Make it that way, you will.
More like Joss, we don't.
Marty Noxon, who was a producer and writer on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, who went on to do a bunch of other stuff as well, has come out and said she was often experienced what she calls casual cruelty on his part. He was very casually cruel to everyone around him, especially as Buffy got more and more successful. So Anthony Stewart Head, who played Giles in the show, came out and said that Joss Whedon came round to borrow some gold blend and never gave it back.
And that is the worst thing he's ever done.
That was a 90s coffee advert.
Was it 90s? I thought it was earlier than that. I thought it was late 80s.
Might be late 80s / early 90s. No, he was on This Morning, apparently, and they asked him about it, and he said that he never saw any abusive behaviour, but what he said is that, was I just completely missing it? He's like, I'm not saying it didn't happen, I'm just saying, was I stupid and didn't see any of it happening?
Yeah.
He was probably hyped up on caffeine, you know, didn't really.
Yeah. Pure snot in the gold blend.
Angel actor David Boreanaz tweeted his support, said he stands by everyone who's made these allegations. Most tellingly of all, Michelle Trachtenberg, who played Dawn on Buffy the Vampire Slayer when she was 15, put a thing out saying that
I saw this.
she kept a sort of air of vagueness about it, but she said that there was basically a clause in the contract that Joss Whedon wasn't allowed to be alone in a room with her.
Yeah, that's pretty damning, I would say. She's dropping hard truths there.
Yeah.
More like Michelle #Factsenberg.
This is the same Joss Whedon who previously, it came out that while claiming to be a feminist, was continually gaslighting his wife and cheating on her with young actresses. So I'm not saying that he is 100% definitely a paedophile, but I'm saying that there's probably a reason that he wasn't allowed in a room with Michelle Trachtenberg. The TLDR here is, I love many of the things that Joss Whedon has made, but my God, what a wrongin'.
Yeah, it's rough, man.
Finally,
Rough.
Nicholas Brendan, who played Xander in the show, when asked to comment, said that he wasn't ready to comment yet because he had fallen on some ice and now he had a paralysed penis and anus and was going to undergo surgery for it.
Shouldn't laugh. I mean, that sounds grim. Jeez, oh. Yeah, any chance you could ask me this later?
Yeah, I broke my dick.
Sorry, everyone can't talk broken dick.
Nicholas Brendan has had a lot of issues and a lot of problems since Buffy has been on, but he said in a statement that Joss Whedon and him were
It's
still friends.
still not catching any breaks, apparently.
You know, but I think as far as trying to avoid having to make any statement on a guy that you still consider to be a friend, despite knowing, I'm assuming, all the horrible shit he did, that's quite the get out. Because you're not going to push for any further comment, are you?
That's true. Yeah. Fair play. Yeah, as Mr. Robot would say, being asked about Joss Whedon just made my dick go limp forever.
That's been our roundup of
roundup of horrible bastards.
Yeah, FUD Society. You know, I can't wait to really enjoy something that someone's made and not find out that they're a horrible bastard later in life.
Yeah, I don't think I've had to go through that. I think it must be a really tough thing if you've been really invested in a fandom of a thing that you really, really cherish for a lot of years, particularly during your formative years. I guess it must be a real challenge. I've not had that problem with anything, really. I've been relatively lucky, I think, with most of the things I've been really invested in fandom-wise. So I've not really had to face this. But it is a helpful reminder that people are human, even people who create great stuff.
And some are worse humans than others.
Yeah, as Morrissey might have sang, speaking of absolute wallopers.
Don't you dare say that word on this show.
What, wallopers?
No, Morrissey. I won't have that name spoken in something that we're creating.
He who shall not be named. Oh no, that's a J.K. Rowling reference. I can't even use that either.
Oh no.
Noted turf J.K. Rowling.
You're a turf, Harry. Anyway.
Alright, so let's leave horrible people in the past. I did see some sad news today that this is not going to be an episode of Eps of Reggae. I'm just going to keep it brief. But Uroy died, who is a great reggae pioneer. Might bring him up in an episode of Eps of Reggae, maybe the next one.
Please do. Because it means that I don't need to remember this name for when we finish recording and then look him up. It means you can just drop it on me at the next episode.
Very cool. Yeah, might do that. But he was one of the, not the first, but certainly among the first to develop that what they call the toasting style. A toaster in reggae is one of those vocalists who really pioneered that sort of what is essentially, if you were a layman, you would call it talk singing. But obviously it was pre-hip hop, and it had a huge impact on the development of hip hop. But it was that kind of MC style that's like part singing, part talking, and very, very rhythmic, very syncopated. Actually, as far as roots reggae goes, I have a feeling that may be more the kind of stuff you would enjoy, at least as far as artists from like the 60s, 70s, 80s go.
You're going to needle my fondness for hip hop and just sneak some reggae in there.
Yeah. Hey, yo, dog, I heard you like the rap, so I put some reggae in your rap so you can reggae while you rap. Yeah, press F for you, Roy.
A non-ironic R.I.P.
Well, we're talking the cultural landscape, because we do that on this podcast. Did you see the news about Moormother and her residency at CERN?
No.
Now, I realised just how crazy that sentence sounds. There was an open call internationally, I think it was like September, October last year, where arts at CERN is a thing, right? I think it's called the Collide Residency Award. It's some play on the Collider anyway. But for a few years now, Moormother has been involved in this thing called Black Quantum Futurism. It's a collective, and it's her and a writer called Rashida Phillips are kind of the two main presences in it. Rashida Phillips, incidentally, is a great writer of very speculative science fiction. I have one of her books, which was really hard to find. I had to pay extortionate money for it online, but I just thought it sounded so interesting I have to buy it. And it was worth it. It was great. The title alone, Black Quantum Futurism, you'll already get a sense, James, of why I'm really interested in it.
Yep. Yes, there are 3 boxes there and they've all been ticked.
Yeah, so they do various different kinds of things artistically, exploring those themes, and it's also very rooted in black radicalism as well, so there's a very political dimension to it.
Can I interject real briefly here, Craig? Sorry,
Sure.
to just say, does it not make you like a little bit sick when people come up with names that good? Like they've got a project and they call it Black Quantum Futurism, and we take ages to come up with a podcast and we call it F Sobriety.
You wouldn't believe the chalkboards and piles of sketch pads and trying to work out what we were going to do, trying to work out a mission statement, and we came up at the end with F Sobriety. But yeah, Black Quantum Futurism is literally the way forward. So they're going to do a 2-month residency at CERN, and then I believe it's also going on to the Hangar Centre for Art Research in Barcelona after that. So it is a big deal.
Yeah.
And we've spoken on this podcast before about how much we love Moormother as an artist, just what a vital artist she is in the contemporary landscape. So this is, I'm absolutely stoked for her and Rashida Phillips that this is happening. It's just crazy. But when I saw it announced at first, I was like, that must be a mistake. Not because I don't think they deserve it, but what, CERN are actually doing this? Because their stuff is so political.
Yeah.
That, I mean, and Moormother's own politics are really radical. She's not in your kind of left of liberal version of black radicalism. It's proper black radicalism, you know, and it's one of the things that really gets me excited about her work, is she is channeling a lot of very politically radical stuff into that sci-fi milieu, that Afrofuturist milieu, which I just find really rich and exciting. So the fact that CERN are given a platform to that is just incredible, and it's obviously going to highlight her and Rashida Phillips' work to a much wider audience, and it's also going to open the doors, I imagine, for a lot of more radical artists to get these kind of opportunities. So it's not often I say this at a big high-profile arts development like this, but I think it's a reason to be cheerful.
I've got two things to say about that. First is, do you suppose that CERN putting on this arts grant and like having people who are so radical in their political beliefs about it is a pushback against the sort of neoliberal dismissive attitude towards science that seems to have been pervasive in the last 4 to 8 years? And they're like, you know what, science has got your back.
I do think that's a good observation, yeah. I mean, I think it makes perfect sense that that's the case. I mean, as much as CERN is a big organisation with billions of dollars behind it, it is fundamentally grounded in science, and so anything that obstructs the progress of science, you know, they're going to want to find any way to fight back against it. And there's a way of looking at that where you could say it's quite cynical, perhaps, on some, and I don't doubt it is quite cynical, at least in some elements within CERN, but I also think it's just as likely there are elements within CERN that are 100% behind this for all of the right reasons. The thing about a scientific community is that it's not a political monolith, because all kinds of people are attracted to the sciences, you know? So it's a really interesting and really exciting development. I'll think of a couple of links that I can put into the episode title just to explore black quantum futurism a bit more, because it's very, very hard to encapsulate in a concise way. But certainly where the kind of things that I'm interested in, both as a reader and a writer, where approaching history as being also inevitably part of the future, and that all of human history is part of a cycle, and all of the ways in which the time of people of colour in terms of how it's been exploited throughout history and how it's still looked down upon. Like, there are so many really negative stereotypes about how various different people of colour are lazy and don't use their time properly, all these really horrible racist stereotypes that still exist, that in actual fact, the point that Rashida Phillips and Moormother have made is that black people inevitably inherit a sense of time from African history, whereas it wasn't viewed linearly, and like a lot of non-European cultures for centuries had a similar way of looking at time, that it's not a linear progression, that in fact is more cyclical and more simultaneous. And I love the idea that they're taking that to somewhere like CERN, where obviously they're very concerned with with you know, the nature of time and just, you know, what exactly the fourth dimension is, how it works. The fact that all these artistic expressions are being brought into the same arena as the actual scientific research, that's just so exciting to me, and it's so rewarding, and it's so vindicating in a lot of ways that a lot of things that artists like these, and even myself, even though I'm another white guy over here,
Slim Whitman over here.
Slim Whitman over here, that I just find exciting on an artistic and philosophical level. That it's being legitimised by hard science is just enormously exciting. I really think it's... Bring on more of this, 2021. That's what we need. We need more stories like this.
Yeah, but having said all that, though, have you taken a moment to consider the negative outcomes of this, Craig, right? Because if any musical artist is going to open a black hole at CERN through a performance, it's going to be Moormother. Maybe,
but on the plus side, it definitely means that white supremacy is fucked forever.
Yeah, do you know what? Do it. Bring on the void.
I'll give you this quote here. The project seeks to understand the ways in which quantum physics can influence how people think about, experience and measure time in everyday reality, exploring the possibilities that quantum physics offers beyond the limitations of traditional linear notions of time. Through the project, we'll connect with scientists based at CERN to learn more about their investigations of time and physics, specifically through studying experiments being done on CPT symmetry, investigations into quantum theories of gravity and other phenomena of quantum physics as it concerns inquiries into time, and all of it based in a socio-political context. That's incredible. I can't believe that's happening at CERN.
Good stuff.
That's my good news story of the week.
My sort of goodish news story of the week, say goodish, you'll understand why in a sec, is that I've been reading lately about the stop-start nature of the newly being produced Dungeons and Dragons movie, which is being put together. Now, I don't know if you saw the Jeremy Irons Dungeons and Dragons movie back in the day, or
I
either
never did. No, I was aware, but never saw it.
or either of its direct-to-DVD sequels. It wasn't great. Jeremy Irons is brilliant in it. He is chewing the scenery just like you wouldn't believe, probably just to pay a mortgage or whatever. You can tell Jeremy Irons isn't a big D&D guy, right? Marlon Wayans is in it as basically playing Marlon Wayans, but in a fantasy setting. The effects are really bad. The lore of the game is not explored in any way whatsoever, and it was a wet fart of a movie, essentially. And then there was 2 direct DVD sequels, which attempted to explore the lore more, but had no stars, and even lesser effects budget. However, now, given that the zeitgeist of Dungeons & Dragons is at its kind of peak at the moment, or at least as high as it's been for the last 40 years, there is a new Dungeons & Dragons movie being put together, written by the guys who have written the new Spider-Man movies, and currently starring recently announced Bridgerton star Reggie John Page. Is that how you pronounce that? Is it Reggie?
Is this an episode of F's of Regity?
Do you know the guy I mean? I don't know how to pronounce that. It's a French name. Reggie Jean Page. Anyway.
Oh, our French listeners are absolutely enraged right now.
Just lost all the French listeners, man. Really sorry about that. Anyway, he was the star of Shonda Rhimes' Bridgerton, which was recently very successful. He's been added to a cast which currently already includes, and this is why I'm kind of excited, Chris Pine and Michelle Rodriguez. Put Michelle Rodriguez in something and I'm going to watch it. Doesn't matter if it's Dungeons and Dragons or not. The only thing that worries me is that Jonathan Goldstein and John Francis Daley, who previously worked on Spider-Man Homecoming, are directing and writing. There's apparently chatter in Hollywood that it's going to be a sort of self-knowing wink-wink comedy movie, and I don't want that. There's a lot of lore in D&D that could be explored to make a great movie, and I worry that this is just going to be another, we've got the rights to the franchise, let's fuck it. So what I want is, Disney, you can buy Hasbro, buy it, put it in the MCU.
If there's one thing to say about the state of the world of corporate conglomeration, is that those conglomerates are not conglomeraty enough. Let's evil core that evil core to the max.
We heard you liked conglomerates, so we put a conglomerate in your conglomerate so you could get a good D&D movie. But no, I'm quietly hopeful, but I'm also pretty cynical that it's going to turn out well. But I'll keep you guys informed in future episodes of Sub RPG. Chevy Chase?
First of all, gay. Second of all, stupid.
Thank you, Chevy. Other thing I'm excited about forthcoming, I saw Sylvia Moreno Garcia, writer of Mexican Gothic.
How would you describe that book?
I would describe it as a Mexican Gothic, and The Gods of Jade and Shadow and some other great novels. She has a forthcoming novel called Velvet Was the Night, and I just saw her post about it the other day. The cover looks amazing, and I know book cover, but I'm like, oh, that's a great cover. But then her description of it is as follows. It's a noir following a daydreaming secretary and a paramilitary goon on the hunt for a missing woman against the backdrop of political strife in 1970s Mexico. And I'm like, hello! But between that and the more modern news, it's like, this is all of Woodsy's Christmas CCCs. So before we dive into Mr. Robot Chat, how have you been amusing yourself lately, James? In part, whatever we are of Lockdown 3 Tokyo Drift.
What have I been doing, Craig? What have I been doing? Well, I watched Wandavision, obviously. I finished the Dungeon Run, if you remember me talking about that a few episodes ago.
Yes.
RPG stream, which was subsequently cancelled by the network it was on. So it was quite sad. They had a really emotional but really nice final episode. But recently, on social media, I've seen that they have signed some legal papers with the online network that they were with, and appear to have wrapped up whatever legal problems were stopping them from taking that property and doing it on something like Twitch. So the chatter now is that they're saying hopefully they'll be able to start the show up again, and it looks like they're going to do it on Twitch, which is really a place they should have been doing that in the first place, because it would have had a massive audience on Twitch, because no one knows what caffeine.tv is, aside from Drake, who funds it. That was some pretty good news for me, being the RPG dork that I am. I was super happy to see that hopefully the Dungeon Run's going to be coming back. Other than that, I've mostly just been editing this here podcast that we do, shoving it out into the atmosphere to see what people think.
Fair dues. Speaking of podcasts, I've been really enjoying a podcast. It's a Twin Peaks podcast, take a drink, called Talking Backwards. And I think it only started like 2 years ago, maybe just less than 2 years ago. And it's obviously three white males, because of course. But they're going through the entirety of the Twin Peaks franchise bit by bit. One of them is a kind of longish time fan, or he calls himself a long time fan. I think he saw it for the first time about 10 years ago. He's not a long time fan in the way we are, James, as Aldians.
Oh yeah, we are OG TP.
And a second one is a bit more familiar, and then the third guy has never seen any of Twin Peaks before. So they're going through it and podcasting about it, and honestly the best thing about it is hearing the newbies' reactions. Shout out to Tyler, because he's a funny guy, and I'll put a link in to the podcast in this episode description. There have been some amazing takes as he's been going along, and it really brings it home to me. It's like when you're watching that show for the first time in the context of seeing it in the 21st century, it must seem like a bit of a head fuck, because the first few episodes, like, I don't even understand what this show is, because he wasn't even really picking up on the fact that it was a soap opera, because he'd never really watched a soap opera before. So I was like, what is this? And then at the end of the third episode, where you get Cooper's dream sequence, he was actually almost out on it. He said, guys, I don't know if I can continue with this because I don't understand what the hell this show is. And the other two were like, oh shit, maybe we're going to lose the format of this podcast. They were genuinely quite worried about it. Fast forward quite a few episodes. This I thought was the funniest thing. Post the Leland Palmer death episode, spoiler for Twin Peaks, the episode that's called Dispute Between Brothers, if you remember the one, James,
yep.
It's the one that opens with Leland Palmer's funeral.
Yep.
And Dougie Milford, the mayor, is having the argument. Dwayne Milford, the mayor, is having the argument with Dougie Milford, his brother, and it's like introduces so many ludicrous, broad sitcom elements. The end of that episode, Tyler says, I think this is my favourite episode so far. And I was laughing so hard. I was like, this is fantastic.
Amazing.
He just had such a kind of left field view on the whole franchise. Like, this is brilliant. But I've ever since then, I've been absolutely binging that podcast, and I cannot stop listening to it. I'm now at the point where they've started The Return. Now, Tyler, so far, loving The Return.
Really?
He watched the first 2 episodes, went, I don't know what's going on, but this is amazing. It's like, and he actually, I mean, he does say what is, I think, quite a truism. It is an entirely different show from the original ones. He's just like, yeah. I'm all in. This is crazy, and I love it. Don't know what's going on, but it's fantastic. And I think he's given every episode of The Return so far 5 stars. Sorry, I should say 5 James Hurley foreheads, because that is their scoring. So yeah, I cannot recommend it enough for Twin Peaks fans. Talking backwards, it's a top podcast. Other things I've been distracting myself with is the Adam Curtis documentary series, Can't Get You Out of My Head, which I've had a realisation about Adam Curtis lately. I think quite a few years ago, I used to think there was something quite smart about Adam Curtis, that I felt he was teaching me things when I was a bit younger, whereas now, not to sound too, I've heard it all before, but most of the things that when he's talking about a subject that I'm already invested in, I feel like I know enough about the subject that he's not telling me anything new about it. Effectively, what he's telling me is, first of all, he's given me lots of great visuals that I get really excited by. Oh, that's great stock footage of the Black Panthers and whatnot. But then he is wrapping around this narrative about conspiracies within conspiracies, and conspiracies that are only perceived conspiracies. And ultimately, is there such a thing as conspiracy? And do we really have any freedom? And I'm like, I feel like you've told me this same narrative countless times before. And yet, I guess I'm still in. Somebody on my friends list on Facebook last week actually said, I've come to the conclusion that Adam Curtis sounds exactly like Keir Starmer. And now when I'm watching Can't Get You Out of My Head, I'm like, this does feel like Keir Starmer is giving me what he thinks are hot takes. And I've realised that politically there's probably more in common between Adam Curtis and Keir Starmer than any actual leftism that I thought. I used to think of Adam Curtis as being a kind of lefty equivalent of a QAnon documentary, maybe, or
like
a zeitgeist.
Alex Jones for lefties.
Right, yeah. Well, now as I'm realising he's not even that. I feel like Adam Curtis, he's got himself into this nebulous political position where he's just got a get-out clause that is constantly, but is anything ever certain? And I'm like, you're just using that because you haven't decided where you actually sit on any political issue. Basically, you've just boiled it down to, but we can never be certain, so, shrug. Basically, it's just one massive shrug emoji at the end. Still, great documentary maker in the sense of he's very dedicated to digging up stock footage I've never seen before. If that's your margin for deciding what makes a great documentary and scoring it with Clint Mansell, take a drink every time he scores Clint Mansell. Actually, I saw somebody post a Adam Curtis bingo, and it's just a bingo card with things like presenting a dichotomy between order and chaos, ominous lingering shot of the World Trade Center, stock footage of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, but this was a fantasy, burial track plays. I was thinking about trying to adapt it into a drinking game, but I do fear I'd probably just end up in intensive care less than halfway through one of these episodes.
Yeah, you got to save your liver for the podcast, man.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm pretty sure, though, like you say, I don't need to see it because I've already seen some Adam Curtis stuff.
I've not learned anything from it at all, but I've found it diverting.
As long as he's having a good time. Oh, speaking of having a good time, I did remember another good thing that I've done lately. I have been checking out the new/old but extended Dua Lipa record, Future Nostalgia, the Moonlight edition.
James, let me just stop you there. In the interest of making sure we hit our podcast within a podcast quota, is this an episode of F-Popriety?
I think it might be. Cue the music. Hi there, and welcome to another episode of F-Popriety, the podcast in which Craig Woods and myself discuss all things pop music.
The well-established podcast within a podcast that we definitely did not just half-arse come up with here on the hoof because we realised we hadn't done a podcast within a podcast.
No, I mean, if you believe that you've never heard this podcast within a podcast before, you're mistaken, sir. You're mistaken.
Adam Curtis would like to talk to you about self-deception. Anyway, you were saying...
yes, Future Nostalgia, the Moonlight edition, was released, and I've got to say, great. I have an opinion about it. I've got a theory about it. But first, you've heard it, haven't you?
I have indeed, and I enjoyed it. It's done nothing to sway my opinion that Dua Lipa is incapable of making a bad song.
Yeah, we both. If anyone has listened to, or I'm assuming, if you're listening to this, you've listened to our epic end of 2020 episode, during which we both talked about how we believed that Dua Lipa's Future Nostalgia was the pop record of 2020 for sure.
And I did call her the real life Dazzler, and frankly I don't know how you can possibly compliment a real life pop star any higher.
Now, especially, like, have you seen the cover for the Moonlight edition?
I have.
That's a Dazzler album cover for sure. But yeah, so part of me wonders, because the new songs that are on it are great, they're fantastic. They round the runtime out a little more. There's that beautiful video for the new single with like the love story with the lobster, and it turns out it's the Titanic, and it's a great video. But what I think happened is, if you remember, it was not long after the start of like OG lockdown number 1, like, you know, the original lockdown, if we all remember that far back in 2020, that she didn't so much surprise release it as quite suddenly release Future Nostalgia, because it had been leaked. So rather than just let it be leaked for ages and then release it, I think the label just jumped on and she just dropped the album quite suddenly. But Future Nostalgia is a very short album. It's a very concise album. By
contemporary standards it is, yeah.
So what I wonder is, was it incomplete at the time and there were other tracks still being finished and they just released the finished ones, and this is like everything that was going to be on it? That's maybe what I wonder.
The tracks are definitely strong enough that you feel they should have just been released in the first time round.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if this is the Future Nostalgia that was planned to be released. Future Nostalgia, short album, but on a killer album, on a flawless pop record. And say the Moonlight edition, it just adds greatness to greatness, man. Dua Lipa is, as far as contemporary pop artists go, she's like just in a league of her own at this point.
I think she'll go far, that Dua Lipa. I think she should stick at it.
Stick at that singing game. I'm considering actually purchasing the vinyl because the vinyl looks really good. And it takes a lot for me to physically buy an album these
I was
days.
about to say that, yeah. Get the fanfare trumpets out.
Yeah. But yeah, if you haven't heard it yet and you're a fan of good pop music, or good music in general, even if you've heard Future Nostalgia and you think probably can't be topped, it's worth it. The extra tracks are totally worth your attention. So, Dua Lipa, if you're listening, which I'm sure you are, good ep. Good job.
Good ep, Dua. Thank you for that.
Speaking of pop music.
So yeah, I see what you're angling for there, James. Because I did already bore you to death about this. The weekend that we've just had here at the time of recording, Saturday the 13th, Mexican pop dynamo Dana Paula had a live concert streaming, which I paid for. I paid for to get stream time just so I could watch it at an ungodly hour because I'm a complete freak. It's no secret to you, James, you know I like my Latin pop music.
It's not weird to me that you would do that at all.
It's not all hip hop and reggae and R&B and death metal around here. There's room for Latin pop also.
You're having a normal one.
Having a totally normal one on a Saturday night, the night before Valentine's Day, sitting by myself, watching Mexican pop superstar Dana Paula perform what honestly was the most impeccable pop concert by what I can only describe as the perfect pop star. I know you just said that about Dua Lipa, but I'm telling you that Dana Paula is actually the perfect pop star. She's everything you want a pop star to be. Unless you want a pop star to sing in English, then I guess you're shit out of luck. Well, she does sometimes sing in Spanglish. But yeah, she is actually a superstar in the Spanish-speaking world, but virtually unknown in the English-speaking world. But she's impeccable. Like, her whole aesthetic is just incredible. She's just an amazing spellbinding performer. And the concert that she did was split into acts. So there was like several outfit changes and there was like several set changes. And the set that she was performing on, she had this amazing group of dancers with her. They were doing great, just God's work in terms of interpretive dance work of the songs. And the first set she did was all like a whole bunch of bops, like really upbeat, her most upbeat pop tunes. And then the second act was more kind of somber and earnest. And then the third act was very much focused on the Latin elements. And then the final act was very much like a sort of a medley of those elements, like kind of bringing it all together. It was amazing. I sat there with tears of joy streaming down my face, thinking to myself, how does such a perfect pop performer exist? And I feel like, I know we've touched on this before, right? But for all you quote-unquote serious music fans out there that just don't enjoy pop music, whatever part of your soul is missing, that you can't enjoy pop music, that you know you did when you were a kid, because we all did. We didn't have any choice about it, and it was great. I accept maybe not all contemporary pop music is for you, but there are just some performers that I'm like, come on, how can you not love that? Dua Lipa is one, and I think that it's perfect that I follow this up talking about Dana Paula, because she's perfect in every way. Such an incredible vocalist. I saw that you liked something I posted on Twitter, actually, that was a clip.
Yeah, the camera work was particularly impressive.
Right, and those notes that she's hitting there, man, it's crazy.
Kept going up and up and up.
Yeah, her range is just something else. And she also, and this is important for a pop performer, she looks amazing. She just looks great. She looks like she should be on a stage. And she's an impeccable dancer as well. And everything was so brilliantly choreographed and synchronized with her backup dancers. It's everything you want pop music to be, and I wept tears of pure joy. And after it was over, and I told you this, James, I've been checking YouTube every day to see if anybody's uploaded bootlegs of it, and every day somebody else has uploaded parts of it that almost immediately get taken down by, as Terrell Wellick would say, a team of Universal Music Mexico's most annoying lawyers. But every day somebody else puts it back up. Shoddier quality every time, but each time I'm like, I need to watch that again. It's not brought me enough joy this week. So yeah, Dana Paula, I love her so much.
I'll see if you can find a still existing link to put into the show notes.
Yeah, I don't think there's much chance of it staying up, but yeah. Dana Paula, incidentally, also an actress. She has been, I only learned fairly recently, like a couple of years ago, that she was a child star in Mexico for a lot of years on television. She is actually also in Elite, and funnily enough, when I started watching that show, I did not know she was in it. And when her character first appeared on screen, I actually thought, well, that girl looks a lot like Dana Paula. Her character's an antagonist in that show, and she's so great in it. Like, you really hate that character. But she's the daughter of the Mexican ambassador, and as soon as that was established, I was like, wait, that is Dana Paula. She looks very different in the show, and because she's played a character that's so unlike her onstage pop performer persona, I was just like, holy shit. Turns out acting involves being really good at not being yourself.
Who'd have thunk
Who
that?
knew?
I do have one thing to say though, Craig. If you're reduced to tears by incredibly well staged, incredibly well choreographed pop performances being streamed live, for your own sanity, I recommend you never ever dip your toe into the world of K-pop.
Yeah, I've only ever dipped a very small toe into K-pop. I had a friend who was really, really into it. And I realised just what a vast ocean that is, and I was like, I think maybe I found it a bit too daunting to even go any further with, so I was like, nah, I'm good.
I've seen a few of the streamed performances. I'm not a big K-pop fan particularly. I know that they're the kind of bands that people get insanely like obsessive about and stuff, but the production values on these shows are like mind-blowing, off the scale, and and it makes me think of quote unquote real bands doing streamed performances where it's four guys with guitars going and now you're like, no, I want wraparound LED screens and like drones flying around and 100 people doing perfectly choreographed dance moves. Thanks, please keep your guitar indie streams. Also worth noting, this doesn't really fit in with F propriety. The other thing I've been doing is that the Hell Interface remix of Midas Touch by Midnight Star came up as a recommended video in my YouTube, and I haven't listened to that song for ages, and I just had it on a loop for about 6 days because that song is a jam. So if you're listening to this going lol at these guys with their pop opinions, yeah, I can listen to Boards of Canada for 6 days straight, and I still will tell you that you should check out Donna Paula and go and check out Dua Lipa, because we're cool.
Yeah, we're cool that way. In the absence of any footage from the Dana Paula concert, I'm just going to post a bunch of links from our videos, because fuck it. Any of you are into Latin pop and for some reason you don't know who Dana Paula is, well, that'll help you. I've been on such a high after watching that concert. In fact, James, as you can see on my Skype icon, I even have Dana Paula as my Skype icon. It was one of those experiences that just reduced me to a kid. But I'll return to adulthood probably in another week or so, or whatever approximation of it I ever occupy. While we're on this podcast within a podcast,
Popcast within a podcast, if you will.
Hey, Mahalia, a great R&B singer from the UK, she dropped a very nifty single this week called Jealous, with a guest spot from Rico Nasty. And Mahalia's a really soulful singer, and having Rico Nasty juxtaposed against that is so great, and the video is absolutely stunning. I'm just going to post a link to that. I'm not even going to describe it. Just go ahead and treat yourself and look at it. It's so sumptuous, and they both look amazing. There's a lot of black leather involved, and they both look super cool. And yeah, she's like the perfect place to drop that. Also, pop news, Don Richard has also got a new album coming soon, so I am super excited about that. And the imagery is very much in the sort of Janelle Monáe Arch Android, that kind of channeling Metropolis, all that sort of imagery. It's got a feeling it's going to be a bit electro, and Dawn Richard is one of those artists who, first of all, insanely prolific, but just keeps reinventing herself slightly each time, and she's never put a foot wrong. She is one of pop music's true geniuses in my book, so I already know that album is going to be amazing, and I'm super stoked about it. So expect that to get talked about at some point on another podcast, forthcoming.
Oh, and while we're on the pop kick, another pop thing I hadn't mentioned yet, I don't know if you checked out the 34 and 35 remix by Ariana Grande.
Yes, I did.
Featuring Megan Thee Stallion and Doja Cat.
Doja Cat, yeah.
Wow.
It's pretty great, yeah. And that's another great combination of voices and personas. I will say I always enjoy Ariana Grande's collaborations. She's always great at picking collaborators, and she always has a way of finding just how their different strengths work together. She's got such an impeccable and distinctive voice on her own that she knows what her own strengths are, and so getting other artists to come in and do their own thing. You know what, by the way, having Megan Thee Stallion and Doja Cat is almost like overkill it could easily have been overkill, but I thought the balance on that song was just right.
Yep, everyone brings just what is needed without overpowering another one.
I'm going to make the bold statement and say it did nothing to make that song any less sexy.
And also it goes without saying, The video is... I don't want to sound like a creep talking about this, actually, so I'll just say the video is 100% James McAvoy sweating.gif.
And that has been another exciting episode of F Propriety.
Toodle pip. Good ep.
Good ep. Right, I think that's enough preamble. I think we need to edge our way into the world of Mr. Robot, since that is, rumour has it, that's what we do around here.
If anything's going to bring you out of that state of childlike giddiness that you were in, it's going to be
Right,
this
exactly.
episode of Mr. Robot.
Oh boy, we are in for a rough ride, listeners. Yeah. Some happy Mr. Robot related news though, did you see? Carly Chaikin announced this week on her social media that she has her own TV show that she has written and going to be starring in, called Messy, on Minimax TV.
Fantastic.
It's a dark comedy about a mother-daughter duo who organise houses for a living. I don't know how that's a job, but whatever. But the irony apparently is their lives are complete messes, and Carly will play the daughter. So yeah, that's something to look forward to. I'll be really interested to see what she's made of it.
You can almost guarantee that we will watch it.
We will definitely be watching
very
it,
likely
yes.
talk about it, regardless of whether we enjoy it or not.
And if we don't, the listeners can enjoy listening to us trying our best not to admit to ourselves that we're not enjoying it. If you want to hear two grown men have a meltdown of self-denial, then maybe it could go that way. But
Imagine us sitting here trying to seriously criticise Carly Chaikin. It's not going to happen.
that's not going to happen. I think what's more likely to happen is we'll make an excuse not to continue with it. Brush it under the rug.
But yeah, speaking of Carly Chaikin, more on her in a minute. But first, time to go to the bar, Craig.
I think it's my round.
I think so. We'll be right back after these short messages. Just back from the bar there, Craig. Turns out they didn't have any baked Alaska.
Oh no.
That's a 34-35 remix reference for you hip kids. They did have drinks though, fortunately. What are you drinking tonight?
I'm drinking the classic Casillero del Diablo Shiraz.
Nice. A good wine.
It is, it's one of my faves.
I've had the Shiraz and I've had their Cabernet Sauvignon, and both get thumbs up from me.
Yep, well that's 4 thumbs all round.
4 thumbs out of 9.
That's 4 James Hurley foreheads. What's your tipple of choice, James, tonight?
Tonight, Craig, I'm drinking Williams Brothers Joker IPA.
Oh, there you go, an old cold hairdresser's classic.
Yep. Shout out to the cold hairdressers.
Alright, are we ready to dive into what is a particularly harrowing entry in the opus of Mr. Robot?
Let's cue the music.
We are releasing our Flying Pickets-esque EP of a cappella renditions of TV theme tunes, available wherever such awful things are peddled online.
Available in the online equivalent of the pound bin. So, Mr. Robot.
Season 1, Episode 6, Brave Traveller.
Written by Kyle Bradstreet, who has written several plays,
Yes.
including Honour Thy Mother, From Prague, The Cafe and Alcohol. He also wrote on the TV show The Borgias, and something that I found quite exciting, Craig.
What is it?
He is currently working on the USA Network adaptation of the Night Vale Presents podcast Alice Isn't Dead by Joseph Fink.
Wow. There you
I
go.
don't know if you were a Welcome to Night Vale listener.
I only went listened to a few episodes, but I was certainly aware of it. Obviously, having listened to a few episodes. It'd be weird if I listened to a few episodes then went, what happened there?
And here's the thing, tying our whole podcast together, if you will, Craig. Kyle Bradstreet is also an executive producer on Marvel and Disney Plus's forthcoming Secret Invasion TV show.
Oh, wow, there you go. There you go. That's a pedigree to get excited about.
Yep.
It was directed by Deborah Chow, this episode. Now, I know her name because she's worked in Better Call Saul.
I was going to say, I saw that, I knew that there would be a definite shout out.
Yeah.
She's also worked on Jessica Jones.
Yes, so I see.
The Mandalorian. She worked with ex-Disney actor Gina Carano. Possibly.
She also made a version of Flowers in the Attic starring our very own Annie from Twin Peaks, Heather Graham.
Oh, she directed that. I'm sure I've seen that, actually.
Yeah.
Or at least clips of it. She also worked on a TV show called Copper alongside Kyle Bradstreet.
Well, there you go.
So they have previous of working together before Mr. Robot.
Kyle Bradstreet is one of the core members of the Mr. Robot writers' room. His name does appear a lot. In fact, I believe he also gets listed as a producer, probably from about season 2 onwards.
He is listed as a producer on most episodes of the show. Alters between supervising and executive producer.
Ah, there you go.
He has written 9 episodes of Mr. Robot in total.
So yeah, definitely one of the key members of the writing room there.
Yep.
Which perhaps explains why this episode is particularly strong.
He's a guy that knows what he's writing.
For sure. Alright, so we begin this episode with a needle drop, and it's Lee Hazelwood, Some Velvet Morning, which, classic song. And I love how the vibe of that song is so mellow, but of course, if you're familiar with that song, it's got a kind of sinister edge to it, which pretty much sums up, it's the perfect foil for this scene as it unfolds, because this scene unfolds in the most kind of prosaic scenario. I don't know about you, but I remember the first time I watched this episode, obviously there's the tension there, but I had questions as to how are they in this room, and why is Vera not here? Why are Vera's guys not here?
Yeah, I had the very same visceral reaction the first time I saw this. I remember thinking, I genuinely thought I had skipped an episode.
Yeah, I had sort of had that sense as well. It's instantly unsettling because of your assumptions coming into the episode.
But it rapidly becomes clear over the course of this opening scene why they're there. And what I've written down here is worst restaurant ever.
Incidentally, the title card we get is over a painting by Gilberto Hernandez Ortega, who is a Dominican artist, or was, I should say. But this is one of his many untitled pieces. And it's a super unsettling painting. It's one of those very sketchy looking close-ups of a human face. It's almost like a kind of scratchy version of the Scream. A detail from the Scream, but it's one of those things that as soon as you're in that, as it shows you that restaurant, which for me has major vibes of, did you ever experience Cafe Insomnia in Glasgow when it was a thing?
Yes.
I got vibes of that. It was basically a greasy cafe that was open at all ridiculous hours of the night.
Oh my god, yeah, no, that is hilarious actually. I didn't think of that, but you're so right. It is. It's got the same lighting and everything.
It does. It gives me major flashbacks to that. And Cafe Insomnia was one of those spaces where just some of the strangest characters in Glasgow would turn up, because of course they would. It's a place that made beans on toast at 3 a.m, so what would you expect? But yeah, I always get heavy vibes of that whenever I watch this episode.
I'm sure I remember coming out of clubs and staggering in there and having shitty food, and just sitting there while I waited for like the first bus home, and like 3 hours after the clubs closed.
Yeah, halcyon days.
The only other place in Glasgow I can think of that would have had a similar clientele is directly across the road, the Noodle Bar, which was also open insanely late.
Yeah. And it was at that, for people who don't know Glasgow, this was like right at the edge of St George's Cross, which is like just on the edge of the major part of the city centre, and it's like right on the edge of the motorway as well, so it's like where all the major routes are. So basically all the clubs used to just pour out and people would just pile it. And obviously if you're absolutely out your face at that time in the morning and you see there's a place open selling breakfast food, of course you're going to go in there. So it used to get really stowed out at a certain point, just with all kinds of very loose characters. Yeah, R.I.P. Press F for Cafe Insomnia.
It became, if memory serves correctly, Steak and Sherry.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I'm not sure if it had the same opening hours or not, and I was never in it when it was Steak and Sherry. But yeah, I don't even know if they sold steak and or sherry.
Maybe that was the proprietors' names. So anyway, Shayla and Elliot are sitting at a table, both looking very perturbed. Elliot is very apologetic, feeling he has caused all of this. Shayla's not hungry. I mean, the dialogue here does nothing to give away the switcheroo. It's literally only when Vera's goons pop into frame, they're like, alright, no, of course they're sitting there under duress. And it's like all the awkwardness of even that customer bumping the table and stuff. The first go around of this scene, it's like, oh, could this scene be any more awkward? But then when you get the context that they're sitting there essentially, Shayla's a prisoner, it's like, oh no, this was way worse than I thought.
Yeah, and the switcheroo happens really fast as well. One customer reacts to how they're huckled out.
Right.
It's a guy that's getting some takeout or something, but everyone else just sits there with their heads down. Like,
yeah, when Shayla gets dragged out by Vera's goons, there's literally like one guy takes notice but pretends he hasn't, whereas everybody else, they just look down at their food, at their feet, and that gave me really disturbing. Anytime I see that, it gives me really disturbing flashbacks to when I've been in kind of a similar situation. It must have happened to you as well, when you've seen something a bit dodgy take place and suddenly everybody becomes hypnotized by their fucking shoes or whatever, because everybody's just a bit too nervous to kind of even recognize that it's happened. And it's one of the unhealthiest things in our society, really. Like, and we live in a society, by the way, in case you hadn't heard the Joker's message.
we live in an F society.
That, we should be willing to break that bubble a wee bit more readily, albeit not in this case, I guess, because Vera's goons are pretty deadly.
Yep.
So the dialogue here is painful, because it's almost this edge of it that Elliot's trying to make it normal, because he thinks, I have to try and keep Shayla calm. I have to try and, make this, somehow take the pain away. And he asks her, what are you thinking about? And it's like, she's the first time we met. It doesn't seem that long ago. And she says, now look at us. And there's so much fucking tragedy in those lines, man.
When you're watching this, it's like, oh, I bet this is going to be the most like harrowing scene in this episode. Nope.
Right. It's particularly harrowing, but by the end you realise this is the last moment Elliot and Shayla ever spent together. It's such an unsatisfying conversation, and obviously it's full of fear and terror, and it's everything about this is so tragic. Shayla did not deserve this, man. This is horrible. And she says to him, even, you promised me, which I think is the most painful thing about this. It's like, you promised me, the unsaid words here is that you wouldn't let me down. And Elliot is like, I'm going to get you out of this.
But he's not. Spoiler alert.
Spoiler, he's not going to get her out of this.
He's in a zero-sum game.
Yes, yeah, it's a phrase that comes back a couple of times. More on that later. So Elliot, meanwhile, after Shayla's dragged out, he's forced to tag along with Fernando Vera's brother Isaac and their goon DJ.
And they come off as just a pair of absolute wallopers.
Right, yeah.
Isaac is such a wee fanny.
He really is. That's the perfect description. He's a wee fandan. Isaac is another one of those characters who reminds me of fandans that I've met in real life at some point. A guy who thinks he's the big I am, but actually it's because of whoever he hangs about with or whoever his family is that he's kind of coasting on somebody else's reputation, sort of thing.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, insufferable.
And he gets made to take the call. It's your boy. Knowing now what we know about Vera, what he does later in this episode, it's real credit to the writing and the performance by Elliot Villar that despite how horrible he is, you just love seeing that character when he comes back. He's great. And you're like, it's Vera. You're like, oh no, wait, he killed Shayla.
right, exactly. He's charismatic and he's compelling, and this is how these people get to where they are. This is how they wield power. Charisma itself can be a hell of a drug. And I think the thing with Fernando Vera as well is he is smart. And when he's spieling out all his philosophical cod philosophy bullshit, even though it is kind of bullshit, you can tell these are still the words of a smart man. The fact he believes in something that it's easy for us to sit back and go, well, that's just so much hot air. You can tell he's thought deeply about it. He deeply believes these things, and it makes him dangerous because he's already decided that there's nothing he won't sacrifice. And you already get the clue about this earlier in this episode. There's nothing he won't sacrifice because he's already decided there's a great cosmic force at work, and that's what will guide him. Some of the dialogue here on this phone call with Elliot is particularly great. When he's talking about the origin of Elliot's name, it means brave and true. And he says that his own name, Fernando, means brave traveller, but the brave used to be savage, but the word savage came to mean brave. And there's some nice commentary there about how in our culture, and I think patriarchal culture, most of what we think of as being honourable aspects do come from this kind of savagery. That it's why toxic masculinity is still a thing. There's a lot of what's seen as being an honourable and a good man that is actually rooted in some very backward shit.
Yeah, conversely, like, people who kind of colonized and invaded the United States originally referred to Native Americans as braves.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
In our kind of modern understanding of the word, it seems like they must have respected them or something.
Right,
it's like, no,
right,
they were
no,
referring to them as savages.
They actually were referred to them as savages, yeah, exactly. Vera has once again drawn the parallel between he and Elliot, saying that they're basically on the same journey. And I love the way he says that he's not angry with Elliot, he's impressed with Elliot's power of how he was able to get him shopped and put in jail. And he says, it makes my dick hard, bruh. But he can't spend any more time in jail because he's got crosshairs on his heart. That ain't meant to be just yet. Every single line of Vera's mouth is like pure poetry. It's just so great. But I'ma hug you, bro, he tells Elliot. Now, Elliot is very insistent at this point that it's impossible. He cannot break him out of jail in one day. And he's pleading for Shayla's safety. He's like, let her go, she has nothing to do with it. And Vera tells him, she cool, bro, she'll be there tonight. We'd be one big happy. I love you, bro.
And he does.
I know, he does, exactly. It's the most toxic masculinity version of love. So Isaac and DJ take him back to the apartment. No word on Shayla. So Elliot's insisting the prisons will all have regular control systems, so it is possible to hack a prison, just not in the time frame he's been given. And I quite enjoy Isaac's line here, techie hacker, computer genius, my thick Dominican dick. But Elliot says it's almost impossible without research. He really needs to understand the system that he's dealing with. But the goons, unsurprisingly, are saying, just do what we say or Shayla dies. And it's at this point Elliot tells us that he's figured something out about Isaac, something about him bothers him, so he of course immediately hacks Isaac's phone. Meanwhile at Allsafe, Angela's doing an all-nighter because she's researching the fallout from the Ecor Washington Township, what's the word I'm looking for?
The info dump.
Yeah, the info dump, there we go. And so she's looking up all the lawyers who were working on behalf of the claimants back in the day to see if any of them can help. And while she's doing that, a very helpful co-worker drops a bunch of files on her desk and says, Happy Monday, Angela. I don't know about you, but every time I see that, I'm like, fuck you.
Every time I see that, I just hear ding, 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 ding. Yeah, this Allsafe employees twisting Angela's melon, man.
Happy Monday, Angela. Yeah, fuck you, Sean Ryder.
Yeah. Angela's like, nope. She nopes out of there. She's like, fuck this work.
I'ma do a bez, not do any work. Meanwhile, Darlene is outside the prison, scattering fake iTunes gift cards.
Up till this point in the show, Darlene has always been cool, but this point,
Here she graduates to super cool.
She is so super cool in this and following scenes. She's amazing. It was just heart eyes this whole bit. Just casually dropping them on the ground and then just like hanging out in the background.
Yeah, and there's no payoff from this just yet. It's another couple of scenes later where we realise what she's doing. But I like that it's sprinkled in here. Again, it's another sign from the show that Darlene is a major player in this story. And we don't even get how she got there. We don't even know that she's been in touch with Elliot at this point. Which is kind of cool because it just suggests, no, Darlene has her own agency in this story. But we do clock, obviously, that she's outside the prison. It's like, all right, okay, the gang has been called. Angela meets up with Natara Nayar about the Washington Township case. Natara Nayar represented the victims' families previously. Angela wants to reopen the case, but Natara Nayar is sceptical. I would say I love this actress, Sakina Jaffrey. I love the energy she brings to this role.
The delivery of when she's like, stickies! And you've highlighted and underlined. This must be serious.
This must be serious.
It's so good, yeah.
As she pours herself what they call in the business an Irish coffee. Yeah, great stuff. It's when she tells Angela the grim thing that she's got. See that guy in the suit over there? He raped his pregnant girlfriend, smashed her head in with an Xbox for cheating during Halo. And she has a better chance at defending him than going up against Evil Core.
She's defending a pro gamer.
Pro gamer. But Angela insists, you called back. You're the only one who called me back. Nayar is obviously a bit more human than the other lawyers, so she figures she's got a chance.
And we find out very shortly, actually, that she she's kind of appalled that no one else called her back. She's like, what, not even Latimer? And yeah.
Right, yeah, she name drops a couple of the other ones, and she's like, she's disgusted that this happened. So it kind of nags her that she's got the responsibility to try and do something about it. One of the things I do like about the show a lot is that even these supporting characters, you do get a good, rich sense of who they are as people. And it's a strength of the writing, but I'd like to say I do really like Sakina Jaffrey's performance. I just think she embodies so much her body language and everything. It really tells you a lot about where this character's coming from.
Yeah, the way she kind of posits that you're basically trying to put internet gossip against the most powerful conglomerate in the history of civilization. The fact that she takes it on, you're like, yeah, you always love the underdog. And she immediately endears herself.
Even amongst the world of lawyers, there's still some good ones. So one of the prison guards picks up the bait.
Top fan of ODB.
And Darlene, I have to say, not being totally inconspicuous here, loitering around in what I'm calling her Lolita costume.
Which comes in handy later, though.
So the guy, clearly not the brightest, plugs it into his computer. I do enjoy seeing the throwback to the classic Avast antivirus malware block, because that thing always used to give me the shits when it came up.
It does that. I have freak out as well. It's like, ugh, pulls the USB out and it's like, nope.
Yeah. So blocks the malware. Elliot sees that he almost had it, but the malware was blocked. So he's realised that Darlene's exploit was not the best. Isaac is impatient, slaps Elliot around the head, and I'm like, fuck you, man. Flipper is giving it some jip. She clearly has to go for a walk.
As much as I hate Isaac and as much of a wee dick as he is, I kind of love his response, where he just like sort of goes off one at Elliot and he's like, I'm just kidding you, I take the dog for a walk.
Yeah, of course you can take the dog for a walk. While he and DJ treat themselves to what we're going to call some recreational cigarettes.
Shout out to DJ, at least he's polite enough to smoke at the window.
That's true.
And it's not like there's many of them in that apartment, so you know. There's
a couple of moments in this episode actually where his character displays a strange kind of conscience, a strange kind of manners, because he does like strangely question Isaac at parts, going, dude, what's going on?
But as we'll find out later, there's a reason for that.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So Elliot meets Darlene around the corner, and she says, of course the malware was shite, I only had an hour. She has the choice phrase of, these two douche stools are going to have to sit in their pricks till we find a better solution. Classic Darlene.
Bit of a hacker info here for you, Craig. He says,
bring it.
Did you just get this off Rapid9? Rapid9 is a reference to a genuine website called Rapid7. Rapid7 are a company who provide a security framework called a Metasploit. You can download the Metasploit, and this is what it does. From the Rapid7 website, attackers are always developing new exploits and attack methods. Metasploit penetration testing software helps you use their own weapons against them. So essentially, Metasploit from Rapid7 is all the exploits hackers will use against you that you download and you run through your system till you figure out how you block them all.
Holy moly.
She's essentially, I guess, the thing here. She's just downloaded an exploit from a security company and tried to use that in her.
Yeah.
He calls her a script kiddie. Script kiddie.
Is that a real term?
It's a derogatory hacker slang for a hacker who uses pre-written code. And she says, I only had an hour.
Yeah, I repeat, I only had an hour.
Yeah, and he says, you fucked me. One of many F-bombs in this episode.
Fuck, motherfuck, noise.
Yeah, they were not shy with the X-bombs. They were not shy with the X-wings. They were not shy with the X-Men. They were not shy with the F-bombs in this episode. Their quota of F-bombs a season, I feel like most of it went in this episode.
Yeah, 5 fucks and a motherfucker. Starring Ted Danson, Steve Guttenberg.
Feel-good family comedy coming in 2022.
Sorry, yeah, so you were saying, she says the amazing douche tools line.
Yeah, she says, I'm going to tell them what's up. And then DJ comes up and flashes the gun and says, that's what's up, girl.
To be honest, I did have to pause at the point because I was laughing so much at douche tools. Darlene gets all the choicest insults in this show.
Yeah, her lexicon is particularly splendid. Meanwhile, back at Atara Nayara's office, she openly calls the other lawyers pussies, which I quite enjoy, for not having responded. But she explains to Angela it took her 8 years to rebuild her business after the case against Ecor, the original case, was thrown out, and that she feels it's not worth it to try again.
You can only imagine how many of their most annoying lawyers she had to deal with.
Yeah. So Angela says, what would it take? What would we need? And Atara Nayar boils it down to having a reliable eyewitness on the inside when the decision was made to falsify. So, as she puts it, unless you're Facebook friends with one of those assholes, then it's a waste of time.
Yeah. She needs to find someone that she can flip.
Yeah. I love this moment here of where she decides to try and make the conversation personal. Like, she genuinely seems to care who these people are that she tried to help years ago. And so she asks Angela, what's going on in your life? Do you have a boyfriend? How's your dad? I really think that's a really beautiful moment, and it's one of the things this show does brilliantly. In amongst all the, I feel like in the hands of a lesser writer, a show about hackers could be the coldest, most unfeeling show. This show has a heart that's so huge and so human.
Yeah, it never really struck me the first time watching it until this point that, of course, the lawyer would know Angela and know who she is. You know?
Yes, yeah, and she'll remember her as a wee girl. You know, so it is a nice human moment. But Angela quickly tells her, well, I work for a company that doesn't respect me. My boyfriend cheated on me. My dad is drowning in debt. So it kind of brings it all back around swiftly to the case against E-Core. Meanwhile, at Evil Core, I think what's probably my favourite tete-a-tete in this episode, which is a high claim considering where this episode ends.
Yeah.
But Knowles versus Wellick. Yeah, there's some really sharp dialogue in this scene. So Scott Knowles is ostensibly interviewing right hands for himself as the CTO position. And he's sitting there sighing, rubbing his eyes. And Terrell comes out and goes, oh, those fluorescent lights are hell, aren't they? And Terrell insists the interview is a waste of time. And as he puts it, let's just play hooky for the rest of the day. Face it, I'm a shoo-in. And he eyes up Scott Knowles' watch. And Scott Knowles says, oh yeah, it was a gift from the Prince of... Doesn't even matter. And I like the idea that he doesn't even remember.
Tyrell Wellick asks, is that a Vacheron? He says, no, it's a Patek Philippe Tourbillon. Mm-hmm. So, because like I'm shitty, pointless trivia guy, so I looked up how much these watches cost.
Yep.
And if you're the sort of person who spends the amount of money on these watches that these watches cost, you should probably be shot.
Yeah.
Vacheron watches range from a more affordable $2,000 to about 50.
Yeah, that is insane.
However, your Patek Philippe Tourbillons start around 250 grand. And depending on what one you get, go up to about $500,000. One sold at an auction for $31 million. And it's not like one of the first watches ever made. It's just a watch that this company made and put up as part of, like, I think it was a charity auction for the insanely rich. And yeah, $31 million.
That is absolutely obscene. If this show wasn't already making us hate corporate capitalism, you can bet the mining involved in the making of those watches is probably of exactly the type that Elon Musk's family made their fortune on.
Absolutely. Later on in this exchange, when he says, I'll give you the watch, it'll help you pay off your mortgage, it's like you can believe that.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, there's some great dialogue here. Scott knows clearly no dummy. He knows fine well that Terrell is seething inside. It's like, you probably wish I'd fall onto the subway tracks. And Terrell says, no, you're being paranoid. Just wanted to thank you for dinner. Enchanting evening. All that. Tell Sharon I say hello. It goes off to walk off, and Scott Knowles nails it. Did you enjoy the view? Oh, you thought she wouldn't tell. And what I enjoy about this is it draws a nice parallel between the two couples. Because I think we kind of assumed as viewers that the edge that the Wellicks would have is that they're open about each other's deviancy. Whereas it feels like the Knowleses, Sharon's almost not shy. You kind of get the sense that Sharon's not shy, but the sense that, you know, she probably did not give any reason as to why she didn't just immediately oust Terrell from the bathroom. Like any normal person might keep it a secret because they'd be a bit nervous about how their husband might receive it, as in their husband might ask, why did you not immediately shout? You know, whereas Sharon's clearly told him, well, you know how it is.
Joanna has thoughts on this later as well. So.
She does, yes, yeah. So Terrell, caught in a trap here. It's one of the first times, really, that we've seen him at a loss. And Scott knows his dialogue here is great. Like, you want to watch me piss too?
I've had several glasses of water.
I'm happy to pull it out if that's your thing. Could fly my brother in from Miami. He's the bladder of a small child. You could watch the entire Knowles' family if that's how you get off.
You probably bust a nut watching him take a leak.
It's great shit. So he drives it home. You're not going to be CTO, and I want to see that look. The only way I know you'll stop these silly games. That's when he offers him the watch.
Yeah, because before he says that about the look, and Tyrell's still kind of defiant.
Yeah,
and he's like, nope, I'm out of here. And he takes off his watch and offers it to him.
He needles with it. You've got a child on the way. This might pay off your mortgage. Are you still in that neat 2-bedroom in Chelsea?
And then it snaps. It's like, that's the look I wanted.
That's the look I was on. Yeah, that's great stuff. So good. I know we praise the writing on this show constantly, but in a lesser show, Scott Knowles would not be this formidable.
Yeah.
And I think it's great that the writers were brave enough to give Tyrell, even this early in the story, an adversary who is not going to be remotely a pushover, who's 100% got Tyrell's number and is very much his equal in terms of strategy. I mean, even the bit part players in this show, all of them are quite vivid and strong, and I love that about this show.
Just goes to show that if you know a lot about wine, you know a lot about life.
As I have definitely shown time and time again on this podcast. If by life you mean random trivia about various items of popular culture.
If by wine you mean South American wine.
Specifically wine from Chile, Argentina, and that's about it. Meanwhile, back at Elliot's apartment.
Elliot can't catch a break.
That's weird, man. I've literally written Elliot cannot catch a break. So yeah, he's got the Elliot sweats. Darlene now is in the corner, also a hostage. As if things could not get any more complicated, Angela turns up at the door, clearly wanting to discuss with Elliot her thoughts about pursuing the case against Ecor again. So Isaac instructs Elliot to shut her up and get her out of the way, and that they insist that Darlene stays with them. And Isaac has the immortal line, "Just don't try any dumb shit, you dumb shit." These Vera guys, they've sure got away with words.
Vera surrounds himself with, like, just pure dafties, though. As becomes apparent in season 4 as well. You know, it's like he's got a whole new set of dafties around him.
Quick segue before Elliot goes out to meet Angela. Back at the Wellick's house, Tyrell is having an absolute meltdown.
He's having a normal one.
Totally having a normal one. Trash in the kitchen, while at the far right of our screen, Joanna is just calmly munching down what will probably be about her 6th meal of the day.
It's some sort of sausage on a stick. And the imagery here is not subtle.
It's incredible.
But it's like, I'm assuming if someone's listening to this, they've seen this. Maybe they've not seen it for a while. There's GIFs of this all over
this is a classic GIF. And it sums up these two characters perfectly. Joanna is just at her most otherworldly at this point, her most untouched by the external world.
Yeah.
Whereas Tyrell is at his most kind of infantile adolescent, just seething at the world, frustrated because he cannot get his way.
Martin Wallstrom's facial acting here is absolutely,
it's absolutely
pitch
brilliant.
perfect. Yeah.
And she tells him, "You understand why you're angry? Because you know I'm right." And he's so frustrated, he says, "I had her, she opened her legs for me."
And she does this little smirk. This is not far enough,
Partly
obviously.
not far apart enough.
What a babe. What a total babe.
Absolutely, yeah, what a goddess. What a cold, terrifying goddess. This scene really shows us just how much Joanna is Tyrell's backbone, and it really drives home just why he becomes so kind of weak and lost after the news of her death in season 3.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, spoiler alert, but hey, you already know that, guys. This is a rewatch podcast. She tells him, "Be patient but not cowardly," which is super harsh, but it's tough love, you know. And
you're spinning out of control.
And she says, "We know what she wants now, to be wanted." And Joanna, 100%, she knows what's going on. And all of it's really unpleasant, and I've still got that level of fuck these people. But still, aren't they so cool to watch?
Where was Joanna last week when we were recording episode 11, trying to figure out exactly what Sharon wanted at that exact point? Why didn't Joanna
Right,
Wellick
exactly.
drop in and just say she wants to be wanted? Could have saved us about 10 minutes of runtime.
Yeah, Joanna dropping in the middle of the podcast, a la the Hamilton, just to set it straight. So Elliot meets Angela outside his apartment. He says he's sorry he's not been in touch. He had to think about things post the info dump. Now, Angela's very clear about where things are going. She says, "We always knew what Ecor did. We were right all along. This isn't a reminder, it's just a confirmation of how angry she feels and how justified she feels in her anger, that all of this was deliberate, it was all covered up, it was never an accident." She brings up Atara Nayar. Now, her dialogue here, she says, "I have an idea that will change the world." Which is exactly what's going on with Elliot. Man, it's impossible to overstate just how pivotal a moment this is in the development of Angela's character. And also, if this show has a prevailing theme, it's about lost chances. Because there's definitely a chance here if Elliot wasn't so buried in his own shit at this point, if he'd been listening to Angela, he could have said, Angela wants to change the world. Maybe I should just be honest with her and say, Angela, I'm already trying to change the world. Let me show you something. And Angela could have been involved with F Society, and she would never have had to do the whole thing with Philip Price. She could have been utilised in some other way. Some other way that would not have resulted in her ultimate demise. Although, who knows? I mean, we still would have had the entanglements with the Dark Army and whatnot.
But chances of her being shot on Philip Price's lawn
are definitely
reduced, yeah.
zero, yeah. Yeah, so, yeah, you do get a really tragic sense of, oh, Elliot, if only you'd been listening. But of course he has very understandable reasons for not listening at this point.
Because he's dealing with the consequences of the last time he ignored someone.
Right, exactly. Which is what makes this so bitterly ironic. And I'm going to say it again, this is just an example of great writing here, because it is a sort of classic case. It's almost Shakespearean level of tragedy, where the protagonist is trying his best to rectify a mistake he already made, and unbeknownst to him, by doing so, he is literally repeating the same mistake again.
Yeah. What's the definition of insanity again?
Right, yes, as Einstein said. So she tells Elliot she knows how she's going to do this. She believes it can work, but she just can't tell him the details. And again, it's like a mirror image. Like, you could easily imagine Elliot saying the same thing to Angela about the F Society hacks. So Elliot's so overwhelmed here, and he tells her what she wants to hear. Trust yourself, you'll do what's right. And
she responds with, that's all I needed to hear.
Yeah, that's all I need to hear. Man, it's so fucking tragic. God damn it. God damn it, Angela. God damn it, Elliot.
Dude, in my notes I have literally in capital letters, God damn it, Angela. God damn it, Elliot.
We need a Jinx klaxon.
Jinx! Jinx again!
And then she asks, how's Shayla? And Elliot responds, she's
you know. Tell her I say hi. Oh, like, this show at this point is just going the full Romeo and Juliet, just humping on the tragedy.
Yep.
Alright, so from there we go to a big tell moment, if you know what I'm saying.
Like, how did we not see this coming?
We are the biggest idiots in the history of TV audiences. So Elliot goes back into his apartment building, and there, sitting on the steps, is none other than, what's up, Elliot? Mr. Robot, just sitting there, materialised out of thin air, telling him, you have no time to pull this off.
Mr. Robot's there and knows everything.
Yeah, and there is a very, very cursory Elliot asking him, how do you even know? And Mr. Robot says, oh, because of Darlene. And it's like, alright, cool, well, that's that explained.
And I don't know about you, but the first time I watched this, I guess I just assumed there's like a back door to the building. Mm-hmm. There's like a close or something, or like a basement, and he just snuck in and climbed up the stairs, but
turns out the real back door was the one Mr. Robot had hacked in Elliot's mind.
This is the only Mr. Robot scene in this whole episode.
It is, it's his only appearance, yeah. I mean, it's so freaking obvious now, right? But at the time, you just take it for granted. It's like, well, Mr. Robot's a clever, shady guy. He can get in and about places. That's already been established. Oh, he's having a perfectly normal one.
He's just here to pay his respect.
Yeah, so it's hard line, Mr. Robot here. He suggests calling the cops, and he gives it all the whole spiel about Shayla knew what she was getting into, that she was dead as soon as she started working with Vera. Best thing you can do for Shayla is allow her to become a memory. Alright, so let's try and parse some of this in the context of the Mr. Robot, Mastermind, Elliot relationship. Because this feels harsh even for Mr. Robot. I get what he's aiming for. Obviously, his first instinct is to make sure Elliot survives and completes the Ecor business. I get that.
His first instinct is to protect Elliot.
So he wants him out of danger. So if that means sacrifice, I guess what it comes down to is if that means sacrificing Shayla, fair dues. That seems a harsh conclusion to come to. But I guess it does just remind us that Mr. Robot's purpose is very limited and very clear. It's not really so much about other people.
Yeah.
It is very much purely about Elliot.
Mr. Robot doesn't even seem to take Darlene into the consideration at that when he's just like, call the cops.
No, he doesn't.
Because if they're going to kill Shayla, they'll probably kill Darlene as well.
Right, the logical thing is they'll also kill Darlene, yeah. Yeah, it's it's a pretty harsh moment for Mr. Robot, and he's a character with no shortage of those. But yeah, he's very, very desperate for Elliot just to save himself.
Yeah, actually tells me, he says, they will fucking kill you.
Yes, yeah, he's hammering it home as hard as he can. Like, there's no other way out of this.
To give him his due, he's right. He says there's no plan where both you and Shayla survive this.
Right, exactly, and that turns out to be absolutely true. Yeah, and it's our world, the world we've talked about will never be if you go down this route, if you get yourself killed. And look at what you accomplished. This is failure. This is the old Elliot who turns to drugs, a coward who can't face the truth.
Even though it's staring him right in the face.
I was just going to say, it's a very interesting choice of words there. You need to face the truth right here, right now, looking at you in this baseball cap.
There's so many levels to that, because there's like, you can't see the truth staring you in the face, which we now know is that, but also just that this is the old Elliot. Of course it is. They can't face the truth. Who creates a superhero alter ego and allows it to trap him.
There are so many literal statements in Mr. Robot's dialogue here that also just work on the level of he's a crazy man who wants to make sure that Elliot does his hack thing. And it's like, the first time you see it, you're only watching it on that level. It's only now you're like, oh yeah, he was literally coming out and saying the quiet parts out loud.
Do you think when the writers' room were writing these lines, they're all just laughing like, no one's going to even see this and it's super obvious?
Yeah.
At this point, if Mr. Robot had said to Elliot, I am literally one of your multiple personalities, part of your disassociative...
look here, mastermind.
Yeah. Then we'd all have been like, I wonder what he means by that.
Now look here, mastermind, get yourself out of that loop. I mean, he could have dropped that here right now, and it would have had just as much meaning, you know what I mean? We would never have picked up on it, and now we'd be looked at it going, for fuck's sake.
But Elliot's having none of it. Elliot doesn't believe in the no-win scenario. He's like Captain Kirk doing the Kobayashi Maru.
Yes, so this is where I get the first mention from Mr. Robot. He says, this is a zero-sum game. And that phrase will come back this episode. And obviously it's a common enough turn of phrase. There's nothing particularly remarkable about two people saying that phrase. But obviously it's very deliberate in the way it's used here. So Elliot goes back to the fight or flight thing that he introduced the episode with, but whether he should stay and confront this or whether... And Mr. Robot has presented him with the option that you can just run away from this. But the irony being that doing so would not be running away in Mr. Robot's mind. It would be running towards the truth. So much good on here, man. So Elliot re-enters his apartment and sees DJ flipping through his quote-unquote CDs of music. The digital graveyard.
You ain't got no Pitbull?
No Drake, no Pitbull.
Mr. Worldwide. If I didn't hate these guys before, as soon as I found out they weren't a Pitbull, man.
Yeah, these guys deserve to die. And Isaac asks him, what's up, Rain Man? So Elliot says they need to go to the jail now, that he's got an idea. Elliot tries to insist that Darlene should be let go.
But they're like, nope, she's part of this, she's coming with.
She's in on this, yeah.
When they get to the jail, though, you start to see that they're not as in control as Isaac would like to believe, because as soon as Elliot's hack mind goes in, he just like gets up and gets out of the car. And they're like, what the fuck? And he's just like, I'm in charge now. Yeah,
Elliot goes into full-on mastermind mode from this point, really, because he just takes full control. He's at an absolute badass vigilante mode. It's interesting, he tells us he's comparing his mind at this point to a hard drive blasted by excess voltage, close to fried. And it's like, we think we've already seen Elliot fried before this point, but we had no idea just how deep this rabbit hole was. So Elliot gets in to visit Vera, tells him he needs more time, and Fernando Vera... misunderstanding, says no, it has to be tonight, and he says no, I mean more time right now.
Yeah.
They have to keep talking because Elliot's phone over at the reception is running a signal sniffer that can locate any wireless signal. So by the time Elliot leaves the prison, he can own the network. I like the fact that Elliot doesn't need to explain that to Vera. Vera just gets the gist that, okay, you've got this sorted. But he tells him, you're brave but stupid, because now they're going to be able to track down who's the guy who visited me. Oh, now I've suddenly escaped. But Elliot tells him, no, he's opening every cell, so they'll not be able to trace it to anyone specific.
Oh, yeah, and that's when he stands up and gives it the...
Yeah, ecstatic. It's like, I told you, brah, universe got big plans for us.
And Mastermind be like, sit back down. Like...
Yes, yeah. Mastermind says he's hacked Isaac's phone, and so now he owns Vera's entire operation, and he threatens to leak absolutely everything unless Vera gives his word to leave Elliot and Shayla alone. And that he's set it to auto-send every 24 hours unless he continually disables it manually, which is pretty ingenious.
It's great, and it seems like a plan that should work.
Right, it does. Yeah. The fact that it doesn't, it's just so tragic.
You don't realise quite the extent of who he's up against until the very end of this episode.
Yeah, totally. But he tells Vera that your money will get deleted if you fuck around. And Vera's only rebuttal to this is as he's walking away, remember, I'ma hug you, bruh. Angela visits Terry Colby, or attempts to. I love this actor that plays Terry Colby. He's got one of those great New York voices.
I'm covering up a leak here.
Get away from my house.
Again, the facial expression acting here by Portia Doubleday is incredible. The rage that comes over her face.
Yeah. It's like she's so overcome with all the conflicting emotions that none of them is in a position to take charge, basically.
Yeah. And Colby totally clocks that, and he's like, get out of here.
Yeah. He recognises there's something definitely a bit sinister going on here. Yeah, it's great. It's a great wordless performance by Portia Doubleday. I think is that the last we see of Angela in this episode? I think it might be.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So it leaves us a nice teaser for the journey she's about to embark on. Right, so Elliot, meanwhile, back at the prison, realises the network is borderline unhackable. He says getting the handshake could take days. But he notices the keyboard in one of the guard cars outside. He realises a mobile feed on the cameras with 4G that he realises he can hack.
Yep, Bill Gates' 5G is sending coronavirus to all the...
So clearly Elliot's plan is he's going to infect the entire prison with coronavirus. That's what I got from this. Fernando Vera is going to be able to immunise himself by wearing some tinfoil. Everything will be sorted. So Elliot comes back to Isaac and DJ Darlene, and Isaac insists on taking Elliot for a ride privately. So we know this can't be good.
Yeah, and yet this is one of those moments you were talking about earlier where DJ's like, this isn't right. Yeah,
DJ definitely recognises something is not above board here, but not in a position of power to do much about it. Although, more on that later.
We'll come back to him later.
Okay, so this next scene where Isaac takes Elliot out in what he is intended to be an execution. This is a great scene in so many ways. First of all, this location. We get this big long fence by the dock. This is one of those sort of cliche New York crime drama sets where the only time you see a location like this is when somebody gets executed.
Or Bruce Springsteen's going to walk past filming a music video, one of the two.
Yeah, but it's very... I feel like it's pulling on those visual trope threads. That, in a way, it's sort of harking back again to the idea of the vigilante hack of the week drama. There's several things about this scene that I think are doing that. Elliot is insisting he can free Vera, but Isaac is like, nah, it just wasn't your day, bro. And Elliot is trying to come to peace with the idea of dying at this point, saying, I suppose a bullet through the brain is peaceful in its own right. Which, by the way, this show does all the time. It just peppers in these really weighty existential moments, even when there's so much other shit going on. Like, the fact that Elliot is prepared to die here is really heavy. That he sells it to himself, basically, by, well, finally the noise in my head will be silenced, basically. It's just kind of tragic. But Elliot figures out that Isaac doesn't want Vera freed. It starts to lay out all the facts, and I like that Isaac says, I'd pick better last words, with the gun against Elliot's head. But Elliot says, you're trying to kill him, that's why Vera wants out tonight. You never wanted me to break him out. And Isaac has to kill Vera while he's in prison, because that's his best bet, because otherwise... Vera already knows that Isaac's the reason he's locked up, because we already spoke about that on our previous episode, that it seemed that Vera figured that out.
Yeah, his aspirational little brother.
Yes, it was all in the inflection of the delivery of that line.
But Elliot starts dropping some alternative facts.
He does.
He tells him that Vera is protected inside now.
Yes.
The only chance that Isaac's going to get to kill him.
Now here's the thing, right? See this revelation, this realisation that Elliot has about Isaac. This is exactly the kind of tail end of episode twist / realisation that normally functions as a third act in a standard procedural TV show. Mm-hmm. And again, when you put it with that location and the idea of that this show has continually done that, played around with the idea that this show could still be that at some point. I just think it's a nice touch. I do feel like the show is still doing that consciously.
Especially when you think the little sort of plus guest appearance by Kristen Slater. It's like classic.
Yes, right, exactly.
Because at this point you're like, oh yes, Elliot's figured it out. Mm-hmm. He's going to turn it around. He's going to save Shayla.
The last 10 minutes of this episode are going to be Elliot kicking ass.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is where Elliot goes full mastermind here, or does he go full Mr. Robot, is the note I've got here. Because I noted that when he turns around and faces Isaac, his vocal delivery really changes, and it does sound like he's kind of impersonating Christian Slater.
And do you know what else it reminded me of, actually, on that note? Of when Mr. Robot is talking to Vera in season 4. It's
yes.
the same kind of thing when there's the gun pointed at him and he's just like, I am the gun.
Exactly. Same energy in this scene. And he even echoes, this is where he echoes the zero-sum game, which makes me think, oh, this is a moment where Mr. Robot's in control, if you ask me.
I think you're right.
Mr. Robot's just decided to get the job done here, because he realises his previous attempt to sway the mastermind failed, so he has to try a different strategy. And obviously, I think the mastermind is the one who's came up with this realisation. But for me, I feel like it's either Mr. Robot has taken over here, or the two are just in simpatico at this point.
The more you say that, I think you're right. I think this is Mr. Robot goes, look, Elliot's about to die. My job is protect Elliot. I know this. He does him a Christian Slater.
Yes.
And saves the day.
Given the fact that Elliot, literally all the Elliots have a gun to their head, I think Mr. Robot kicks in here and says, okay, this is the only way I can save Elliot. But yeah, Rami Malek's delivery of these lines is so Slater-esque. And even the expression on his face is so different. Like, it's like so self-assured and so firm. It's not how we usually see. Even when Elliot's at maximum mastermind, this is not how he looks. Like, you compare this to how he delivered the death sentence to Ron back in the first episode, it was nowhere near as assured as this. So Elliot says, let me break him out, and after that you can do with him what you want. It's the only outcome where you have the possibility of surviving. Isaac says, how do you know I won't just kill you afterwards? And he says, well, I don't, but I'm playing my best move, and you should play yours. It's a great bit of dialogue, but once again it feels very Mr. Robot-esque. And
it totally disarms, like, both literally and metaphorically, it disarms Isaac at that point. It's just a pure, like, beaten, defeated resignation that he lowers the gun with. You really think that Elliot's onto a winner here?
You do, I know, yeah. It's not the first or the last time this show will do the switcheroo, but yeah, it really does feel like Elliot's coming out on top.
Everything's coming up Elliot.
Alright, so back outside the prison, Elliot's explaining the plan to Isaac while Darlene approaches the guard in the car.
Darlene puts the lol into Lolita.
Yeah, so while she's distracting him and...
The chat in the back, I don't know if you can hear it, but...
Yes.
Yeah, because I was reading the subtitles. And
I had the subs
like,
on as well.
It's like, you take me for a drink.
It's like so banal and just so cliche, but it's exactly all the things like your average douchebag will just be seduced by. It's like, oh, this hot chick is interested in me. That's all I need to know.
I knew this uniform would get me someday.
So while that's happening, Elliot is hacking into the Bluetooth keyboard. The exploit is on the guy's laptop, so now he can force feed it into the prison network. So now Elliot insists that Darlene is no longer part of the plan. Isaac tries to insist otherwise, and Elliot lays down the law and says, I only need one key to run this exploit, or I can press another key and disable the entire plan. I've made my move, you make yours. Again, if you imagine those lines delivered in Christian Slater's voice, you know, I think you see this. There's definitely takeover or simpatico here. So the guard notices that his computer's gone buggered. Darlene's delivery of whatever.
So many R's at the end. Whatever.
Yeah, this should have been a tell as well. When Elliot says, did I make a mistake? No, I don't make mistakes. Oh, Elliot, you got too cocky, man. You went full Elliot. You never go full Elliot.
Irony Claxon when he says that.
So next time we know it's night time, they're all outside waiting for the breakout. Elliot muses that Fernando Vera understands the wild savagery of the world. I love all this. I love that Elliot's taking stock of all this and recognising that there is some parallel, after all, between he and Vera, which I guess was one of the things the episode was gearing towards all along, and we'd already mused on it, but the way everything comes together in this denouement right here, fuck me, man. This is devastating stuff.
This is wild savagery at its most wild and savage.
Yeah, hashtag wild savagery. Isaac cocks the gun, and DJ was again a bit suspicious. I say suspicious, I mean he already knows why he's got that gun. He said it's protection against any douchebags that try to rush them. It's like, cool story, bro.
That's some Ollie level acting there from
It's a wee bit, yeah.
It's just in case any of these guys try to rush the car.
Isaac, officially the Ollie of gangsters. So the breakout occurs. This is that thing Thin Lizzy always sang about. There's going to be a jailbreak somewhere in the town. Memo to Phil Lynott. I think you'll find a jailbreak usually happens at the jail. I think people knew when the jailbreak was happening. Jailbreak, where in the town could that be happening?
Although it's a damning indictment of the mass growth in the prison industrial complex, that there might be several prisons.
Yeah, that's possible, yeah.
Phil Lynott doesn't know what one there's going to be a jailbreak at, but he
I
knows
take
it's
it back, he
somewhere
was
in the
actually
town.
ahead of his time with his socio-political commentary. So I've written here Village of the Damned. I think I was referring to just all the prisoners emerging from the fence.
Having a great time.
So it's a silent alarm for 2 minutes, and then it's all hells are popping after that. Vera appears, triumphant, says this tastes better than any pussy I ever had. And then delivers the death sentence. DJ, shoot the cocksucker. And of course we have that moment of, wait, is he going to get Elliot shot? That's the old switcheroo. But
Yep.
of course, Isaac gets it through the dome.
Don't press F. Isaac's not worth it.
Ah, fuck that. Save your keyboard finger, guys.
Yeah, rest in piss. Say hi to Rush Limbaugh.
So Vera tells him, my own brother, that's what the universe asked of me, to be my brother's keeper. these lines out of a lesser character and lesser actor's mouth would be awful, man. But somehow this works.
Elliot Villard does not get enough props for what he
he's
brings
great.
to this
he's
show.
So good. His energy is so great. And have you ever seen interviews with that guy, by the way?
I've not, no.
Right, at this point, I'd realise it's that whole thing about, oh yeah, it turns out acting is pretending to be somebody else, right? I know that, right? I get that. But occasionally you just see a performance that is so spellbinding and so convincing that when you see the actor be the exact opposite in their real life persona, there is that moment you're just like, man, that dude is good. But like Cain after Abel, I'll be a brave fugitive, a brave wanderer. Look how you helped me. And he forces him to look at Isaac. Says, dead proof that my operation is over. Go ahead and burn it to the ground. I'm gone. A spirit at one with the heavens, at one with all existence.
And suddenly, Elliot has no power over
No.
Vera at all.
Yeah, we realise at this point that none of the cards are in Elliot's favour in this moment. And this whole thing about us being seduced into thinking Elliot was on top here, yeah, you forget that shit. Car pulls up. DJ piles him into it. As before they depart, Elliot of course asks, where's Shayla? Vera says, told you get her back, bruh. You just didn't realise she was with you the whole time. And unless you're an idiot, you already know what that means. And I remember the first time I saw this episode, I was like, no man, surely not. That's too dark. That's too dark, man. You mean they've been driving around with Sheila's corpse the whole time? That is too dark. But no, Esmail, you went there.
And at this point, the sirens are building, and Matt Quayle's music is building.
This whole scene, man, it's like, see, you could play this on a loop to people. See if you were one of those sick fucks that works in a place like Guantanamo Bay. You could play this on a loop to a prisoner as a form of torture, because it's absolutely horrendous. Not just the emotional devastation, but the dizzying use of the camera swaying around Elliot, and we only get the slight glimpses of Sheila's body at first. And he cannot bear to look at it as well. And then it's the slow sobbing as he forces himself to look. And then in the soundtrack, you get the real siren. And then Matt Quayle just ups the ante with that quasi-siren effect on that final piece of music. That is just so nauseating.
I watched it last night with headphones on while I was taking notes, and that piece of music blasting in your headphones.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Every time I've seen this, it makes me want to throw up every single time. It's like, I can't take this. It's just too horrible.
Rami Malek's facial expressions.
Yeah, peak Rami. He's a great actor, that kid. I think he'll go a long way.
Yeah, I should stick at it. It's that mix of just shock, rage, and grief that change over his face before the sobbing starts. Like, man.
Yeah. And it's such a slow process as well. Like, you see him slowly trying to process the facts and slowly trying to process his own emotions. It's a masterclass in acting devastated. Man, everything about that final scene is straight out the park, soul destroying in the best possible way. The final shot we get of Elliot is just at the corner of the screen, like it's a classic Mr. Robot framing where he's just at the edge of the screen, and we just see him shove his hood up and disappear. It's like the only flimsy protection he's got. It darkly brings to mind Darlene's words of the second episode, even your stupid hoodie won't save you now. And then Matt Quayle's continued nauseating drone over the credits leaves you with the most unsettling feeling at the end of this episode.
For those who do not know about our I think we talked about this in the first episode, or maybe the second episode, our histories with the show. I hadn't watched Mr. Robot until the first season had ended, so I sort of binged it and caught up with it before season 2 started because I heard it was really good. Could you imagine seeing that for the first time and being like, I've got a week? What? And you've just got a week to process what did you just see? Whereas I think when I watched that episode the first time, I was like, fucking next episode immediately.
Same. And I think looking back, I mean, obviously we're in the habit of binging shows now anyway. In fact, it reminds me of something I wanted to say earlier that I'll add on to this once I've said what I'm going to say here. That who knows what was going through my head. I think maybe on some level I was just binging for the sake of binging, but I also think that having been so distressed by the end of this episode that I was like, oh no, immediately click the next episode. I cannot be left with that drone resounding in my head and the image of Shayla's body in the trunk. No, I can't do it. I need to see something else. Show me something else real fast. So yeah, that's the power of weekly television, and there's a lot to be said for it. As much as I enjoy, the luxury of being able to binge a show when I'm at those moods where I just want to sit on my arse and do nothing for an entire 10-hour period. Let's face it, lockdown, there's a lot of that going on. But what I was going to segue to, I do feel like, as much as I binge watched it on my first watch, I feel like that part of me regrets doing so, because I think it actually benefits most from a week-to-week watch. And I think I mentioned earlier on our podcast that I came onto this show late, and I think it was shortly after season 2 had ended that I started watching it. So I binged the first 2 seasons before season 3 started. I'm thankful I at least got the second half of this show to watch week to week, because it really makes such great use of that format, as indeed we are discovering on this rewatch as we're really tuned in to the themes and motifs of each individual episode. That's something you definitely miss when you binge watch.
We also had, though, what I quite enjoy, we had like a proto version of F-Sobriety, which was about during season 3. We'd just get pished at the Tron. Shout out to the Tron, not the Hamiltron, the other one. Yep, and just be like, right, Mr. Robot.
Yeah. And it was like our equivalent of water cooler TV, Tron bar TV.
The water cooler was a big pint of East Coast IPA.
A big keg of beer.
A big pint of East Coast IPA, or whatever dregs they had left of other beers.
Yeah, it's still our most ignominious moment. That reference there, listeners, where there was one particular time we'd stayed in the Tron bar for so long that we drank all the East Coast IPA they had left, with the exception of some dregs. And so when we went up for last orders, they offered us a combination of several different beers that were near their dregs, just so that we could get complete pints. I'm not proud of that on one level, but on another level I'm like,
I feel that was really nice of the bar staff.
It was.
It made me feel like we had a place, That was where everybody, if they didn't know our name, they at least knew that if they saw us 2 fucking clowns walk into their otherwise bar for people to drink in at the break of theatre shows, that they would be serving us all night.
There's those 2 guys who are definitely not going to see the performance, they're just here for the beer. Let's see what we can do for them. It's nice to go to a place where everybody knows your beer. To paraphrase Cheers. Bless the staff of that place. I miss them dearly. Hopefully get back there one day.
I hope that everyone is still able to get their jobs back.
Yes, yeah, for sure.
Because man, good people at the Tron.
Good people, good venue, and they've put up with our shit for long enough.
Are you familiar with the YouTube channel Mr. Sunday Movies?
No.
Mr. Sunday Movies is yet another YouTube channel that does short to middling sized videos about TV shows and movies and pop culture.
That'll never take off.
2 Australian guys that do it. They're pretty funny. And I think they just record the audio for their show and then they send it to someone else, and the other guy edits it and puts in all the visuals. There was one episode, I think they were talking about Wonder Woman, the first movie, and they start talking about the unaired pilot of David E. Kelly's Wonder Woman TV show, which I didn't know if you were aware was a thing that happened.
No, I did not even know that was a thing.
So they've got some footage of it, and they're talking about how it was a kind of on the cusp of the start of real prestige TV being a thing. and the guy that edits their videos, when they say Prestige TV, just puts in like a screenshot of Mr. Robot. And I was like, yes!
Those guys sound alright for me. Solidarity with those guys.
Good eps. Or at least with their editor.
Yeah, what I was going to bring up, did you see, I think it was a review of, it was Vulture, I think? It might not have been a review, but just an article about WandaVision, accusing the show of meandering too much and delaying its plot developments as though it were an overblown movie. And it was literally like, have you never seen episodic television week to week before? Because that is what episodic television is. That's kind of how it works. And I've read that article and I was like, okay, I feel like this was written by a young person who probably doesn't have that much memory of watching television pre-binge era. Because everything that they're trying to say, like, I think there could be legitimate criticism of a show by saying this should have been a movie, right? I think maybe some shows have been guilty of that. Like, there's too limited ideas in this show. They should have just made it a movie. I probably felt that way about a few shows. I do not think WandaVision is one of them. I think WandaVision is getting great mileage out of the week-to-week format. It's parceling out its revelations in a really smart way. It's developing the story bit by bit, almost, should we say, episodically. And it's like, it needs that structure to tell the story that it's telling. And I read that article and I was like, what you're literally complaining about is the fact that it's happening week to week. There's nothing about the story they're telling that could be told within the format of a movie. They could tell a truncated version of it, yes. But to say that this is a movie that's gone on too long, I really think is a bad reading of that show. I'll try and find the article actually, and I might put it in the episode description, but I saw a few people share it and everybody was like, so you're basically saying it's a TV show?
Why is this TV show being on once a week? Why do I have to wait?
It's just one of those things that brought it home to me that, yeah, we've touched on it a few times, that the difference between binge watching and watching week to week, that this was written by somebody who just did not really seem to understand the concept of watching a show week to week, because all of the criticisms boiled down to, why is this happening week to week? Just give me the whole thing now, like a movie.
Like a big movie that I can stop at parts and then watch again later, like a TV show.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, 9 5s out of 9 for Brave Traveller for me.
Okay, well, you dove right into that. We didn't even introduce our scoring system. Are we just taking it for granted now that people understand it?
We've not talked about it for a while. If you're listening to this podcast and you are a fan of Mr. Robot, I'm assuming you've watched all of it and you're listening to it back as a rewatch podcast as is intended, and not as a week-to-week watch with it, because if you're doing that, we have spoiled this.
Yeah, if you're watching week to week for the first time, or even binging for the first time, sorry, we've ruined everything for you. But the clue is in the title, Mr. Robot Rewatch.
So what we have is the 5-9 hack, which will take place in a couple episodes' time. 5-9 is a very important date. That's the American 5-9, not the British 5-9.
It's not the 5th of September. Reclaim those dates, Stuart Lee said.
It's the 9th of May, not the 5th of September. So what we do, our scoring system for anything that we're rating is 5s out of 9, with the highest available score being 9 5s out of 9.
It is not confusing. Stop saying it's confusing.
We could have just rated something as either a 1 or a 0. It would have been much easier. But we also called this podcast F Sobriety. So
after that long-winded explanation, I'm just going to go ahead and agree. I am also scoring this episode, Brave Traveller, 9 5s out of 9. This actually is a perfect hour of television.
It has some of the most iconic moments in the whole series. It has that hilarious Wellick moment. And it's one of the most harrowing episodes of TV that I've ever seen.
Definitely.
And it carries it with such confidence with everyone involved as well, to just be like, okay, you're going to come on this journey with us, and by the end of it, you're going to be shook.
Also, one of the key things this episode does is it in some way acts as a diversion from what has been the main storylines up until this point, because we're very much focused on the Elliot, Vera, Shayla situation. That's the A story. And so we're no longer, for this episode only, it's not an F Society storyline. And so it does feel very different in that respect. And yet at the same time, it still progresses the F Society storyline. And it's a huge episode for Angela, even though
Yeah.
she doesn't even have that much screen time in it. This is a really pivotal episode.
This lays the foundations for everything that Angela's going to do over the next 3 seasons.
Yeah, from this moment on, this is the deciding factor, really, in who Angela becomes, the journey that she partakes in. It really defines her character from this point onwards. So yeah, top quality.
Good ep.
Good ep. Alright, so on that note, we will be back with some more podcastage on Mr. Robot and probably other things soonish. We seem to be getting back into a form of regularity here, so let's see if we can keep doing that.
With any luck, we'll be with you sooner rather than later. In the meantime, calls to action, as it were. First of all, thank you for listening. We always appreciate it.
Yeah, as always, thank you all. The fact that people listen to this and appear to enjoy it, and we do seem to have repeat listeners who come back again and again, we're very appreciative of it, because it's not always a guarantee. So yeah, if we're doing things you enjoy, we're very happy about that. If there's things we're doing you don't enjoy so much, by all means get in touch and give us your feedback. We always appreciate constructive feedback. And fundamentally, please review us and spread the word. Reviews specifically, because that really helps the podcast get noticed.
Yep, if you listen to us on a podcast service that has reviews, Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, that kind of thing, give us a review, give us a like. If you do a YouTube, go over YouTube, hit us with some likes over there, some comments.
Spread the love, and like Fernando Vera, I'ma hug you.
We love you, bro. And if for some reason the only time you're ever on the internet is to download a single podcast and you don't do it in it, just tell a friend. Yeah. Or tell someone else's friend. Tell a stranger in the street. Force your earbuds into their ears in the street and say, listen to these two idiots. Other than that, it's I think that remains for us to have a little look at our respective receptacles for alcoholic beverages, Craig.
Yeah, I definitely don't think there's a more succinct way to put that, James.
Mine has about 50% of its previous contents.
Well, the news I'm hearing from looking at my own glass, one day Craig will talk pretty.
We can get this first time. The last episode took us 4 attempts to finish the episode, so let's finish it first time.
Don't tell the listeners how the sausage is made, James. James, I'm calling it. I think this is officially half the bottle.
Toodle pip.
F Sobriety, Episode 12, A Totally Normal One, was conceived by Craig Woods and James Hamilton, edited by James Hamilton, and is a production of Half the Bottle. The theme music is Colossal Estates by Errors, available on Rock Action Records. I'ma hug you if you check out our social medias, on Twitter at FSobrietyCast, on Facebook.com/FSobrietyPodcast, on Instagram at FSobrietyPodcast, and on YouTube at FSobrietyPodcast. Make sure you don't let the algorithm fool you with videos about sobriety. Baked Alaska. Do you have Baked Alaska? You just ran out? Fuck.